Do-do-doosh. The James Bond Book Club. The Spy Who Loved Me by Ian Fleming. Today's signature cocktail, Gin and Tonic. Pause here for a recipe.
The name's Book Club, the James Bond Book Club. We meet monthly to discuss a James Bond book over cocktails. As always, we're holding our meeting here in the Teresa di Vincenzo Memorial Library. There's a photo from her service. It's the only library in the world that has a spoiler alert emblazoned on the entrance. I'm Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, and today it's the James Bond book that has it all, except James Bond. The Spy Who Loved Me by Ian Fleming from 1962. Now, only one cocktail appears between the pages of The Spy Who Loved Me, and that's a good old-fashioned gin and tonic. And quinine. Gin's fast becoming the signature spirit of the James Bond Book Club 2 meetings in. G&T is the signature cocktail this month, but V&T is the cocktail that makes up the membership for today's meeting. An actor, director, singer, musician, and voice and dialect coach in demand in and around San Diego, but like myself and Bond, originally hailing from the United Kingdom. Our latest prospective member has played multiple roles in San Diego Opera, San Diego Symphony, and at Signet Theatre, amongst others literally too numerous to mention, and played multiple roles, including Mary Goodnight and Gala Brand, in a 2019 stage reading of my TV serial Fleming Bond adaptation, The Moonraker Affair, in the theaters of San Diego. Vanessa Denning, welcome to the James Bond Book Club. Membership is open. Hello!
Tom! This is awesome. Oh, wait. Cheers.
Oh, cheers, yes. Sorry for taking the first drink without you.
I am very excited for this opportunity for daytime drinking.
Well, that's this whole series is a cover for day drinking. And while we're talking about that, let's start with the gin and tonic.
Let's do it.
Yeah. How do you feel about it? I've talked to you a little off camera about this, and I understand you have thoughts.
I do. Well, I have many thoughts. None of them really worth sharing, but I will anyway. I'm a big fan of the gin and tonic. Yeah. Big fan of the gin and tonic. Gin was my, I would say my gateway liquor. My first hard liquor, I would say, as a youth. And back in the day, it was the old Gordon's, which I think you told me was James Bond gin of choice.
Yes, with the caveat that the recipe has changed so much since the 50s, that drink experts are pretty certain now that James Bond would pick something else.
Yeah, with no disrespect to Gordon's, of course, and their heritage, it's a little like drinking lighter fuel.
I don't hear any disrespect there at all.
Yeah. Now I would say
maybe that's why it's served on planes so much.
You what?
Maybe that's why it's served on planes so much, because
perhaps it is, because it mingles in with
doubles up, if add a fuel, they can pop a little in the engine.
Yeah, it brings on a little chesty cough when I drink the old Gordons these days. And then I've in my many years, this is where you go, you don't look it. But in my many years of gin drinking, I've gone through different permutations, I would say. I did go, and I think, again, we had this discussion earlier. I went through the Bombay Sapphire phase where I thought I was real classy.
Yeah.
And then I realized that no, just no. It's all right. Now, my gin of choice that I have always in the freezer, and this is what we're drinking today, is the Tanqueray, of course. Very good. I do like Tanqueray 10 also. This is just classic Tanqueray. I'm also, I have my collections. Can I share them with you? These are all miniatures. They're all from the UK. I have a friend in the UK called Beth who has more gins than any bar I've ever been in. It's pretty impressive. And she always gives me a bunch of miniatures to bring home. So we have the Plymouth. Nice gin.
Yeah, almost 100% certain that Plymouth is drunk by Bond at some point in the book.
It's good. It's smooth, flavorful. I'm a big fan. Hendricks is very popular here in the US too.
Extraordinarily popular, yes.
Doesn't somebody else famous drink Hendricks? I should have looked this up, shouldn't I? I'm not prepared.
Jimi Hendrix?
Maybe.
No.
We have this one. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, but I think it's up here.
Ooh, I didn't even...
It has a little Indian flavor. You can see because it has elephants on it. See?
Oh, okay.
That's how you know. But it's got a little spicy going on.
Oh, interesting.
Very nice. My favorite gin at the moment, and these are two different flavored ones. They're well, I wouldn't say flavored. That doesn't sound classy, does it? They're what's the word? Imbued? Is that the word? Infused. So this is Whitney Neal. Love Whitney Neal gin. It's fantastic. Handcrafted, of course. This is a blood orange, and this is a raspberry. Very refreshing on a hot summer's day.
I could probably go. One of the reasons I gravitate towards Ian Fleming's drinks palette because it's alcohol forward and flavor and alcohol have never been a good mix for me. Like sweet flavors, tangy is as far as I'll go. So of those two, I think the blood orange sounds nice, but the raspberry sounds disgusting to me.
It's not very sweet or syrupy at all. It's like just like the Spindrift. If you had those in like fruit infused waters, it's kind of like that where you just get a hint. They do a rhubarb one.
It's like someone shouting the flavor in the room as you're drinking it.
Yeah, it's like you're drinking lime. Okay. But they do a rhubarb one, which again, super mild, but with ginger ale.
Now, rhubarb I have had, and it's delicious.
It's amazing. But can you remember when we were kids, did you ever have those like soft, I'm going to call them sweets as opposed to candies, but the rhubarb custard candies, you used to buy them like in a quarter in a little paper bag in the corner shop, right? Yeah. That's what it tastes like, but with alcohol. Brilliant.
Your palate has to go somewhere from childhood, doesn't it? It has to.
The first time I did it, I was like, oh,
yeah,
1979. It was like...
Well, I mean, this book club is fast becoming my autobiography through the prism of gin. As I mentioned in the last meeting, that the first spirit, first of any alcohol that I ever sneaked from my granddad's drinks cabinet was Beefeater.
Oh, bless.
So my idea of what gin was up until sort of late teens was just Beefeater, which is to me horrible. And it's exactly so. I had this preconception of gin that I remember being a fancy-ish a meal with my family. And the fancy waiter comes out at the beginning and said, "Would anyone like a cocktail to start?" And I didn't know this was done. And so go around the table. My granddad orders a gin and tonic. My mother orders a gin and tonic, and it gets to me, and I wouldn't know what else to order anyway. So I say, "Yeah, sure, gin and tonic." And I remember it just kind of washing over me with this,
Yeah.
Was quite a good gin and quite a good mixer. I don't even know what it was, but I just thought, oh, this is what everyone's talking about. And then around that time started the gin revolution. The small batch gin and handcrafted. People sort of noticing differences between gins and working harder on making the tonics something special, the whole sort of free kinds of boutique mixers. And in fact, Saddleworth, which is where the village I'm from near Oldham in the northwest of England. I'm not telling you that, I'm telling everyone else that. The Church Inn has the biggest collection of gin in the world.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, I mean that happened in the last few years. Like
Oh my God, I'm totally going. Next time I'm in England, it's a hop, skip, and a jump from where my mum lives. I'm totally going there.
So it's like I don't know what it is, like 500 or something crazy like that. Yeah. So I mean, in the space of my lifetime, I've gone from thinking of gin as this rock gut, essentially. This is what I imagine pirates or poor people.
Yeah.
Like this is what the Victorian poor or pirate drinks. To gin being this very sophisticated thing with lots of variety and
yeah, it's like the new whiskey in a way. I mean, it's never going to replace whiskey, but it has that same sort of kudos now. It's kind of interesting because you think back to you probably are familiar with this, but the old rhyme in London, if any of your viewers have ever been or have seen St. Paul's Cathedral. So in front of St. Paul's Cathedral in London is a statue of Queen Anne, and she's looking out with the church behind her. And that's right in what is the city of London, that original square mile, which is now like the banking area, etc. But poor old Queen Anne, she's the one who had I want to say 17 kids that all died. She's the one that is in that film with Olivia Colman where she won the Oscar.
Yes.
Favorite, that Queen Anne. So she had a pretty desperate time. And the poem was Queen Anne left in the lurch, facing the gin shops back to the church. And so that was just where all the poor went to drown their sorrows of their miserable life and drink gin, which was like a penny a bottle, and turned around.
One of my favorite things that anyone's ever said about gin was Dylan Moran, the great comedian performer. He said gin is mascara thinner, which I do like that description.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's such an evocative image.
Oh my God, I love that.
Again,
I'm doing that, pretending it's my own.
Preconception I've never got over, but it's interesting that gin is.
Well, I brought my gin books for you. We've got the Bartender's Guide to Gin. This is because my friends from the UK will buy me Christmas gifts, which is lovely. And we do that thing where postage is so expensive, you just buy it on Amazon. And so they go, what does Vanessa like? Gin. And this is what
now own the Bond movies.
I know, right? So we've got the Bartenders. It's classic and modern day cocktails for gin lovers. Is this the one that has oh no, this is a different one. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Then we've got Shake, Muddle, Stir. Not quite the same as Shake and Not Stir, but yeah, Shake, Muddle, Stir. But this book is kind of interesting because first of all, it has a hole in the front, which I love. But it also has the world's best gin and tonics, and it literally has a breakdown of different types of different brands of gin and what their different notes are and what tonics to mix them with, just for G&T, not for any other cocktails.
Amazing.
I was like, this is awesome. Yeah, Hendricks for cucumber connoisseurs, and on it goes, which is exciting. And then this is just Gin Austin.
Of course, yeah.
It's purely just a pun. Excellent cocktails in it. But I am not doing the traditional Spy Who Loved Me. I've gone for lime, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm extrapolating a little bit. I just, I looked at basically, posters from the early 1960s advertising gin, and it was pretty clear that the traditional serving was in Britain was a slice of lemon and ice, maybe not even that much ice, which is fascinating. Like even as recently as a couple of years ago, I was taking an American Airlines flight back to Britain, and obviously they don't know I live here, so they assume I'm come back from visiting. And when I asked for a gin and tonic, they were still saying, "Would you like it with a lime like we do here in America?" And I didn't want to say I've been drinking it with a lime for years, and most of Britain is. But it's interesting that
preconception, we with lemon
in people's minds. And
cat here. Sorry, my cat just arrived.
I mean,
can do a little Blofeld for you.
Well, that's right. Yeah, I mean, in literary terms, though Blofeld doesn't have a cat, Goldfinger does have a cat.
You're right. I'm sorry. That's bad. I know that from the movie.
But the Goldfinger in the Goldfinger books, he has a cat. Oh.
They don't really do this in the book, do they? Oh.
No. In fact, Bond. Bond's spying on Goldfinger, and he's looking in his room, and he finds a camera. So basically, he finds out that Goldfinger has a surveillance camera set up to catch pictures of anyone spying on him. And he grabs the cat, takes the film out, throws them both in the closet. So it makes out like the cat's found the camera and was playing with it. So
how clever.
That's all I can remember from cats. But it's so beautiful. What's the name of the cat?
This is Eleanor. Eleanor 30. I always want to say, we have been expecting you, Mr. Bond. I've always wanted to do that. She likes to sit, but I'm actually at my piano right now because this is where I teach. So this is the piano. And so when I'm teaching, she sits here and watches all day. So she may stay, she may go. She might just want attention.
Absolutely. She's in the club.
She's in the club. Have you read? She has actually enjoyed. Sorry, say that one more time.
And we'll send a special membership card for.
Oh, feline James Bond fan. Look at you. Yeah, she's pretty cute. Anyway, sorry, I was like, oh, it's a cat.
No, it's all right. I mean, it wouldn't be a Zoom call if a cat didn't wander in.
It's true. She's now going to try and drink my gin tea. She's eyeing out the lemon. No, not for you.
I mean, the only other thing to say about, normally I would prepare gin in a far more fancy way with botanicals.
Very fancy.
I'd use peel, have a whole kit. Use peel instead of slices of fruit, and it could be orange or lime or lemon or any kind of thing. So it's interesting that it's quite nice. It's nice to go back to basics. It does make me feel like I'm on a plane.
Right? I know. I did this. What's that about?
I did that. I'm really glad you did that because I did that too, and then I put it in.
I was like, I was gonna do this, right? And then I just was like, no, I'm just gonna leave it. It's funny. So there. Good times.
So well, that's the gin portion of
the gin portion. Although I was a little disappointed when I was waiting. I was like, what is our specialty cocktail going to be? And I was hoping it was pink champagne.
Yeah, well, I mean, they didn't. I'm being very fastidious about it being a cocktail, and even gin and tonic, I think, is pushing it as a cocktail because it's.
Is it?
I mean, it's like I think of a cocktail as two or more spirits.
Yeah, it's basically just gin and tonic.
Yeah.
But
great. I think it's either a No Reservations or a Part Unknown. Anthony Bourdain's fabulous travel series, one of them. He goes to Portugal and he introduces what all the different types of tapas are, and then at the very end he sort of says, "And this is something called a gin and tonic," and he uses the same kind of exotic language to describe putting, and it's like a can of Schweppes, and it's nothing amazing. It's like you drink it and it's very good. Now, unlike Ian Fleming, I genuinely am interested in what women think about James Bond, rather than simply speculating for them. So I'm gonna, let's.
Warm.
Yeah.
I was trying to be British, but I am anyway. We'll let the accent do the job. All right.
We're proud to be British. The scarf has done the job.
I did it.
Dealing with Canadians and Americans mostly, so we're fine. So I'm going to cop to a degree of gender tokenism in having you to discuss the book with me. But if it's any consolation, you're also here because you're a Brit and you perform the work of Ian Fleming. Basically, you're ticking a lot of boxes for me here today.
I'm so glad.
None of that is why I have you here today. It's because I was too scared to do Live and Let Die next because it's so racist. No, that's a joke as well. it was because I knew I'd enjoy talking to you about James Bond and this rare bird of a James Bond book. I mean, is it at all what you expected?
Not at all. So, full disclosure, I've never read a James Bond or Ian Fleming book in my life until this past week. So the only one I've read is The Spy Who Loved Me. So I have no comparison of the written novels of Bond or Fleming. I think I've probably seen all the movies at least once at some point, but I literally have no recollection of what happens in which one. They all kind of merge into one, to the point where I'm like so bad at it. I'm like, is that a Sean Connery? Or wait, is it? I literally don't know.
Yeah.
And and Jaws, of course, I know who Jaws is, but I could not tell you which movies he appeared. It's all like just like, oh, James Bond, Aston Martin, yay.
Would you be surprised that he first appears in The Spy Who Loved Me?
Yeah, a little bit. I was like, oh, I guess that's who it's based on.
And would you be further surprised to learn that many have speculated that horror, The Spy Who Loved Me novel, is the inspiration for Jaws?
I wondered. Because, I mean, it's, Slugsy and horror, like, they're the whole spin-off series, frankly. I mean, they're like Del Boy and Rodney. I was like, what's this about? But I did wonder. I was like, oh, metal cap teeth. Yeah, maybe that's where the idea of Jaws came from. I don't know if it is, but I did make that connection.
I'm on the fence about that. The only thing that makes me think it's probably true is that the first time we see Jaws in The Spy Who Loved Me, he's part of a team, and the other man is a short man with alopecia, who is definitely based.
A short pervert, we'll say, with alopecia.
It's a man. I'm using man in the broadest sense. And of course, Ian Fleming doesn't see him as a man because he's disabled, but that's another point. So the fact that they're introduced together, and that I think it probably is that, but I don't want to talk too much about The Spy Who Loved Me film because it has no resemblance to the book.
Like none, right?
Zero.
At all, yeah.
But I do remember I just want to shout out, I don't normally do that, to my old flatmate Paul Cuff, who may well be watching because he's a Bond nut. And I do remember him pointing out to me that when Kurt Jürgens and Stromberg first introduces Jaws and Sandor, who is the Slugsy clone in The Spy Who Loved Me, he's far more excited about seeing Jaws than he is about Sandor. He sort of says, Sandor, and Jaws comes in the room. He goes, Jaws! And I think that's the director telling the audience that this is the guy to watch. Don't watch Sandor. Okay, Sandor will do his job and he'll disappear from the movie. Jaws is the one we're going to go with for the next couple of movies.
He'd already been contracted,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he'll come back in Moonraker.
That's funny, but no, it's not what I expected at all. I had no idea, and I literally was halfway through the book. I mean, into the kind of middle section. For those who have not read, like my good self until a week ago, the book falls into 3 sections. We have part 1, me, which is the lovely. I kept calling her Vivian, but I guess it's Vivienne.
Yeah.
Who is our first person female narrator.
That's funny.
Okay. Which first of all surprised me, because I was like 6 pages in when I was like, oh, this is a woman. Wait, what? Because I was like, this doesn't sound like James Bond's voice. But anyway, then we get part 2, which is them, which is our Slugsy and horror, and then him, which is Bond. But I'm literally halfway into the them section. I'm like, is James Bond even in this dang book? Like, what's going to happen? And then it clicked on me when I realized she was in, like, well, I don't want to, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about it in 10 minutes. She's in real danger. And I go, oh, he's going to come and save her, isn't he? He's going to just turn up. He's going to have known all along, which is not quite true. But
and that's, I mean, one of the big disappointments, there's a lot I like about this book. One of the big disappointments for me as a reader is that it's entirely a coincidence. His entry into Vivian's life is entirely a coincidence.
Exactly. It made me think of like what's the Stoppard play? Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Which, if anybody knows that, it's like, so Hamlet is the play we all know, right? So Hamlet's happening, and then the Stoppard's play is like literally as if the characters are really existing outside the world of the play. And I literally was like, this is the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead of James Bond. It's like these are tangential characters that if it was a Bond book, he might happen across for half a chapter.
Yeah.
But like Fleming sort of taken it out and expanded, given this massive backstory to this random woman he sleeps with.
Yeah, and he's come from a mission, but it has nothing to do with the the insurance fire.
No, other than it's in Canada. That's like he's like, oh, I've just been to Canada.
Yeah, I've just been to Canada. I've had this very exciting, been on this very exciting mission, which sounds more exciting than, you know, an insurance fire. But there's really, I always expect. I've read this book about 3 or 4 times now, and I always expect, even knowing that it's not going to happen, that the plots will eventually connect up, and that whoever's coming is linked to the Toronto mission that Bond describes. And then I remember, oh, it's just a complete coincidence.
Coincidence, yeah. And then he's gone, and then he tidies it up.
Yeah.
She goes about her messed up life.
Right.
Or did he fix it because he's better than therapy?
And I mean, you know, the only precedent that before this in the Bond books for keeping Bond out of the picture is From Russia with Love. He doesn't appear in the first third of that novel.
Oh, really?
So this beats that by a third, because he said it's 2/3 of the book before he appears in this one.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's, and you know, we'll talk about this in various different ways. But you do. I'm sure, even having not read other Bond books, it's very clear that this is Fleming trying to do something very different.
Right. I think so. I mean, again, without knowing anything, I was like, this can't be the norm. Otherwise, nobody would have ever read them, and the movies wouldn't have been made. So this cannot be the norm. I read 2 things. I in my like, oh my God, I have to get really genned up on James Bond in 5 days kind of brain. I did a little, Googling, as you do. I came across one thing that described it. It was an article in The Guardian when I think one of the more recent films came out, but they talked about this in just a short paragraph.
Yeah.
And they called it an ambitious gamble.
Yeah.
Which I would say is not wrong. I don't know. And then I found this other thing, which was a letter from Ian Fleming to his publisher, which I'm sure you probably heard this, where he says, this experiment has obviously gone very much awry. And I'm like, and yet they published it. But he wrote it in a very short period of time, didn't he? Like a really short, like a month or something. Is that right? Or
and that's, I mean, that's a little quicker, but that's not unusual. He did write these books very, very quickly, and also, 1 year after the other. So it's very interesting that you bring up that letter, because the other part of that is he tried to block a paperback publication of this book. So for a while, I think in his lifetime, it was only available in hardback. I mean, he was Fleming was really affected by the bad reaction to it, and both by the public and by critics. And he tried to block it. And the whole motivation behind the movie adaptation having no resemblance to the plot of the book was at Fleming's insistence. He just wanted them. He just sold the title. He didn't sell the book.
The title is great. I mean, it's a great title.
It is. It's kind of like, here's the title. See if you can do something better with it than I did. Which I think I think he's being a little. I think he's being a little bit hard on himself, because there are very interesting aspects to this book. And
it's a page turner. Like, I mean, there's a lot of it. I mean, we'll talk about, so many things. But where you're like, did you talk to anybody about that, Mr. Fleming? But he writes, it's captivating. And even if some parts you're like, that's not believable, like it's like, well, I'm not gonna, this is cheapening it because it's much better than this, but it's got echoes of Da Vinci Code in which you cannot put it down. I was like, bam, bam.
I think I would be proud of that comparison.
Oh well, that's okay then. Like, I mean, the Da Vinci Code is not the world's greatest book by any stretch. Did I read it in like half a day? Yes, I did. It's that kind of like could not put it down. And like, especially the middle section, because, well, we'll talk about the idea of time and how tempo changes in the book too. But like, it suddenly I was like, oh my God. Like I mean, he's skilled. He's really skilled at that stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Especially when it comes to writing action, he writes action and violence in such a fluid way. It's always compelling. It always jumps off the page to me.
It really does. It's so evocative. I mean, does that tell you a lot about him? It probably does.
Yeah, and then in the last meeting we talked a little bit about his journalistic background, and I mean that cuts both ways. I think that means that he spends far too much time because he was a foreign manager of a newspaper. He has this kind of travel log way of writing about things.
Right.
It's like you always have to. It's like a guidebook. You always have to point out, what the food's like here, and Well,
the whole book is like that, from the different places she goes. Like when Viv is in London and Windsor and how he describes Windsor, it's like, am I reading a guidebook? And then when she starts her journey and he's like describing going over the border in the northern part, the southern part of Canada and the north part of northeastern the US, and it's literally like, I mean, it's really like very evocative. Like I could see it.
Absolutely.
And,
so I think that's part of the, that's the journalist. But the other side of it is the ability to write very tightly and these short sentences that really hit home. This very contract way of writing that is immensely quotable, and just cuts to the chase, quite literally in some senses. Maybe that's where the term came from.
Well, it's funny though, because there's parts of it where you're literally like, oh my God, and there's other parts where you're like, why are they doing that? Like that, and so you start to kind of get out of it. I would get distracted from staying on the sort of momentum of it sometimes, and go, well, that's just dumb. And then it's because something big is coming, but then you're trying to second guess what it is. But maybe that's part of why he wants to do that too. I don't know.
And this whole book takes place in 5 hours.
Yeah, it does. I mean, because the first part's flashback, which is several years.
I mean, if you take out the fact that she's,
the rest of it's like, yeah.
Which is it doesn't, that immediacy is, I think, very interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's what you kind of think it would make.
Either.
Say that one more time. Sorry, I lost you there.
A real-time Bond film.
Right. I was going to say like almost like a stage play, because you could do the whole thing in that kitchen.
Yes, absolutely.
Pretty much. Well, apart from like the bedrooms, but almost. You could almost do it. Yeah, it's like bam. It's like, well, have you seen that British TV show that's huge in the UK, and it's on some of the streaming channels here, called Line of Duty?
I just finished watching the whole thing like last weekend.
But those interrogation scenes, they do them in, I mean, it's multi-camera, but they do them in one take.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, so they have to like memorize it like it's a play, and it's like 30 minutes.
Is that why Adrian Dunbar uses the same saying?
No comment.
They write new ones for him, but he just can't remember them, so he just ends up saying, Jesus, Mary and Joseph.
And the wee donkey, which is my favorite one.
Yeah. That's it.
And the wee donkey too. But no, it's fascinating, because I mean, I read that, and then I actually went back and watched one of the scenes with him. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but with him and Anna Maxwell Martin. And I'm like, she's a phenomenal actress, but a lot of theater. And I'm just watching them, I'm going, yeah, this is real acting. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is that thing of like, it can work on screen. We don't have to keep doing this. And the writing kind of almost made me feel that a little bit. I was like, this would be really interesting to watch, just like as like one long shot, like rope. You know what I mean?
The more I reread this, I began to think it's sort of like, is this a niche area in the Bond films? Like you could release this, you could get Daniel Craig or Pierce Brosnan or whatever to do it because it's like a week's work. You've never had a real-time Bond film. You've never had
one location almost.
One location, yeah. You've never had real-time. Never had that just one location. You've never had. What's the other element that's completely?
There's so few characters.
Right. He's never been in Canada either.
Well, there you go.
So it ticks so many boxes, and you release it under a different title, and you don't have to wait 10 years.
Oh, Canada.
There you go. Barbara Broccoli's.
I have to tell you that I met Barbara Broccoli once. Did I ever tell you the story?
Yes, you did actually, but no. Please do.
Well, it's not that exciting. I didn't really meet her. So I was when I still lived in London, and I went to see the musical Billy Elliot in London's glittering West End. And I had worked at that theatre, actually nothing terribly exciting. I was in the box office, which is very exciting. So I knew lots of people who worked there, front of house and box office. And so when we went to see it, we got house seats. We got these amazing seats. So we're like, I don't know, it's a massive theatre, but we're maybe 10 rows back from the front, which is perfect. Right on the center aisle. This is great. And we're sitting there, and the two seats in front of us are empty, and I'm like, well, these are house seats. I know these are house seats. So the fact that no one's in them right up till curtain, someone big's coming. So we're sitting there, the lights go down for the show to start, and these two people get ushered in, and they're really small. And I'm with Josh, and he's like, one of those is, I think that looks like Matthew Broderick. Anyway, so it's Matthew Broderick and Sarah Jessica Parker, and I think she was in town to like promote perfume or something. I don't know, something she was putting her name to. And she had these like massive puff sleeves and big, SJP hair. And Matthew Broderick's like tiny. And he's wearing this suit that looks like it's his dad's, and so we're like, oh my God. She turns around and she's like, ah, and we're like, oh my God. Anyway, so watching the show, but she's enjoying it, and they're loving it. And she's, at the end of all the songs, she's like, yeah, woo, and great, which doesn't really happen in English theatre that much. We're all like,
spot the foreigner.
So the woman to her left, who's dressed all in black, turns and goes, shh. So Sarah Jessica Parker's like, oh, I'm so sorry. So anyway, intermission comes, and they get like ushered out, and the woman is just like rolling her eyes and like, oh my God. And Josh said, well, you don't shush Sarah Jessica Parker. So we smile and we nod and we have a little conversation. Off she goes. And then my friend Mary, who is one of the front of house managers, comes forward and she's like, that's Barbara Broccoli. And we're like, she just shushed Sarah Jessica Parker. So she was angry when I met her.
I mean, it's so interesting for so many reasons. Jessica Parker has never been considered as a Bond girl. It also explains I'm Matthew Broderick as a Bond villain. I'd love to see, but probably no one else would. It's also fascinating because Barbara Broccoli is sort of, I always get this because I mean the Broccolis are the Broccoli family is American, and yet they are responsible for bringing this this British writer essentially to world acclaim, and I just think it's fantastic that she's the one sort of calling out like the most American of behavior in the audience, because that totally fits in with her with her idea of like, it's like, I'm in charge of the Bond films. I'm basically British. Which is
first of all, I was like, she's dressed completely in black, but like not even like classy, like stylish. It was like just nondescript black. But also, why was Barbara Broccoli watching Billy Elliot? Like, it just is so random. But yeah.
Well, was anyone in the cast that ended up in a Bond film?
I don't think so. Bunch of Geordies? Nah. Do you think?
Right. I just read. I mean, Daniel Craig is a fake Geordie, but
well, that's true. That is true. His Geordie accent wasn't bad though.
Yeah. I literally woke up this morning, and there was a headline on my phone which was about, because I've searched for so much Bond stuff that if there's any tenuously Bond related story in the media, it comes right to my phone now. It's really annoying. But this one was about how Mark Strong lost out on an audition for a Bond villain because he was hungover and he blew his audition. And he claims he was out the night before with none other than Daniel Craig.
Oh, really?
So it's and I know Mark Strong is another fake Geordie, but just our friends in the North connection made me think that.
Yeah, maybe. Well, what's her name from our friends in the North? Who appears in Line of Duty? Gina McKee, who is in fact from the Northeast herself. She's a genuine.
So she's the only one of the. It's not our friends in the North, but she's the only one of the four actually from that part of the country.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I knew, like, because I'm from Durham, right? Can't tell with this fantastic accent I've got, but a bunch of those, like small roles in it, are all people I know. It's like, oh, great. Oh, there's Uncle Alan. Oh, there's, it's like so funny. I love our friends in the North. I've seen it a bunch of times. But it's so lovely to see them young.
Is Uncle Alan Armstrong? Because
he's actually his uncle. Well, he's not my literal uncle, but he's uncle.
Role. He's sort of one of the greatest British actors of all time.
Yeah, my Uncle Alan. Uncle Alan Armstrong.
Again, nothing to do with anything, but one of my favorite moments of any British TV anything is the well, it's a bit of a spoiler, but at one point Alan Armstrong's character is about to be arrested, and he's walking out of his house. He's reading the newspaper. He plays a sort of dodgy politician. Yeah. And the police sort of appear on his street while he's saying hello to his neighbors. And he looks at them, he goes, "Not in the middle of the street, man! Not in the middle of the street!" And I don't know why, that bit has always stayed with me. It's like, and that's why I love Alan Armstrong.
We love him for many reasons. We also love him for, "Can you bag a Tudor?" Mm-hmm. Classic. Yeah. So his parents and my grandparents on my mother's side, they were church stewards at Catchgate Methodist Church together. So he and my mom grew up together, like Uncle Alan.
Uncle Alan, yeah.
And the mummy.
I'm amazed he's never played like a 00 or a section head in a Bond film. I mean, he was in Get Carter, so
yeah, he's so distinctive looking as well. Like, he'd be brilliant, and he's such a good actor. He'd make an amazing Bond villain.
I think, yeah. I mean, I'd love to see him as one of the kind of bureaucrats.
Right. Should we make it a campaign?
I'd be all over that. But because one of the things that's always and it's interesting because Ian Fleming, this is how I drag this back to relevance.
And it was
this was released in 1962, which is the same year that Dr. No, the movie, came out, first Bond film.
Okay. Oh, right.
So, and at the time, I mean, Ian Fleming was scared about a lot of things. How working class Sean Connery was his main objection to this, this adaptation. He'd been screwed over before he sold the rights to Casino Royale to NBC, and they made it with an American Bond who worked for the CIA, and
right.
And he was so he'd been burned basically by this.
Yeah.
Trust what Broccoli and Saltzman were doing, and when they decided to cast Sean Connery, thought it was the wrong choice. He wanted Cary Grant or David Niven. So he was, he had all this trepidation about this, but he also had a trepidation about the representation of the Secret Service being too British, which sounds weird. But what he wanted it to be represented as more of like an FBI or CIA modern intelligence agency. He so specifically sent memos to the people writing the movie saying, "I don't want to see people slapping each other in the shoulders and saying old boy or anything like that. I want them to feel like a modern intelligence agency, like the CIA, like."
Right.
so I think it's sort of it's fascinating because the most recent Bond movies, like everyone in MI6 HQ is so young and like, you know, like real cheesecake actors, and it's like you know, hotties, and you know, and it just, you know, I'd love to go back to not saying anything about Alan Armstrong, of course, but I would you know, back in the day you got some, all the civil servants were this sort of very grizzled British character. And that's kind of what I want them to be, but it's actually something that Fleming would probably object to. He'd probably be fine with the fact that this was all like male models, and, you know, lining the offices of MI6, because that's what he wanted it to be. But I want it to be this kind of like, well, Tinker Tailor, basically.
Yeah, basically.
More from the summer wine with a pipe is what I'm.
Like you could your fantasy cast small roles in the background of Bond films, like literally that'd be so much fun with like the cream of British stage actors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alum and like Anton Lesser and people like that. Like it'd be so good.
Just say it's a day's work, just, you know, and you'll be in a Bond film, and no one's ever going to stop watching those. So,
and you just think all those, like, you know, all the little checks that would come through the mail every time it was shown.
Yeah. I mean, Bob Hoskins got a check for not playing Al Capone in The Untouchables. He was on standby if De Niro didn't want to do it, and he got like $20,000 check through the mail.
Good for him.
So every time he saw Brian De Palma afterwards, he said, "Are there any other films you don't want me to be in?"
I love that.
I mean, we've spoken already about how we're both British expats living in America, and I'm always fascinated in how British writers see America. And most of The Spy Who Loved Me is set there. Obviously, it's, you know, it's not early 1960s America anymore. It's also not the early 1930s Chicago, it seems to be in this book. But did anything particularly strike you about how Fleming sees America?
I mean, lots of description, like the whole like travelogue stuff. Yeah. I was I probably won't be able to find it now, but the bit when she talks about like hot dogs and cheeseburgers, and you know, where she turns up and it's like she describes when she's on her Vespa, she describes, where is she? The like Lake George area as being like really touristy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's yeah. He describes it as kind of like it's become Disneyland.
Yeah, that whole thing, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that sort of it's sort of sense of, I guess a kind of it's not commercialization, because, you know, America's been a commercialized culture since at least the 20s, you know, 1920s. But I think Fleming seems to object to the tacky, what he would consider tacky commercialization.
There's a whole bit, hang on, see if I can find it. The rest is a gimmick crack nightmare of concrete. Yeah, Bambi deer and toadstools, shoddy food stalls selling big cheap hamburgers, and mini ha-ha candy floss, and attractions such as Animal Land. And there's a whole, it goes on. You know, which I think is funny compared to, you know, when she's in Windsor, when Viv is in Windsor, and it's like describes Windsor as this idyll where, you know, you go boating on the Thames and everything's beautiful, and you know, golden summer, and then you're like in this like nasty, smelly, noisy. I mean, and then just stuff like motels and how they view motels.
Oh my God! I mean, I left the book thinking, have I been naive in thinking that motels are not these hubs of crime?
Right.
Or both by the people staying in there and the people who run them.
Running them. Like literally, I was like, what do they call the fancies? Which is just the best name, even though it's spelled PH. I was like, the fancies.
I thought that too. I really wanted, and I didn't do any research into this. I don't know where I'd start. I really wanted to know whether this white goods scam that he describes, where newly married couples stay at a motel and then steal all the
stuff. I'm like, we have to screw it all down
in lieu of wedding presents. I was like, he describes it as if it's a well-known scam, and I was like, is that just in his imagination? Or
Is that what people do, or
Hotels in the 60s.
yeah, is that like what Americans do? Like British people would never do that, but Americans would. I mean, I did wonder. I was like, what's that about? But I mean, it's the irony, of course, is that at the end, or before the end, actually, it's the beginning. But when the fancies leave and they take absolutely everything with them, apart from eggs, which we'll come to the eggs later. But but it says they take everything, and she describes because the only thing they leave is like food for me to see me overnight, and then the gas, the lamp, you know. But then at the end, when Bond is there and they're doing their chase, they catch, when they corner Slugsy and Horror, they're holding TVs.
Yes.
Which was one of my big laugh lines, because I'm like, why are they holding TVs? Oh, so they can't do anything with their hands? Like, hold TV while I get my gun. Like, it was.
I haven't, and we'll talk about it later, but I have another theory as to why they're holding television sets in particular. But
I literally laughed out loud. It was like, why are they? It's like image with these guys, like.
It's so fascinating that you brought that up, because that's exactly what struck me. Was that sort of the how Britain is represented as idyllic and America is seen as this kind of very vulgar place, because I mean, this is 1962. It's nearly 10 years since Casino Royale, which is 53.
Wow.
And in Live and Let Die, which is 54, it's Bond going to America, and it is seen as this, this paradise that the British people wouldn't have access to. Britain was seen as this grim, post-war austerity, and America was everything that wasn't. So it's fascinating that by the early 60s, that's totally flipped.
Totally changed. And I wondered, like, that was the whole thing. Is like, why is she Canadian? Like, why is Viv Canadian? Like, why isn't she just British who happens to be there, right? And I was like, well, I mean, the Commonwealth kind of. Is she meant to be sort of exotic, or is it just that she? I couldn't figure out why she was Canadian.
Yeah.
I don't know if it matters, but she keeps. I mean, the whole thing about like growing up. I mean, the one thing I did think about was it's exotic because she's from like the French Canadian region, so she's got this, French bringing, and then she's she's orphaned and brought up by this aunt. So you get the two religions, and that kind of sort of goes, it makes the Catholicism seem more legit somehow. But I was like, that's kind of tenuous. I don't think the religion thing really bears that big a deal on it, other than she literally is guilt-ridden and like, well, not guilt-ridden, but like the Catholic guilt, and also like her weird attitude to sex. And it's kind of like, is that why he did it? Was it like just sort of like not very good backstory writing? I just couldn't figure out why she was Canadian. I was trying to find reasons, and I just don't know if there is one.
I think those are all perfectly sound reasons, and I was very interested. I mean, I was very interested, obviously, in the context of Brexit. I was very interested. So much is made of how racist people are towards her in Britain for being Indian. And I'd like to. I've already refilled. I've already. And I remember making a note. It's like I wish I could say that foreigners were treated better than this now, but obviously that's patently not true given what's happened in the past 4 years. So it's. I think it, to go back to a kind of earlier metaphor, it ticks a lot of boxes. But none of those kind of add up to why you would do it in the first place, like why you would rather be American or British. I guess it, in the mind of a writer, you might be. I don't quite want full American. I don't quite want full British.
Maybe.
Yeah, and there you go.
Commonwealth. It's the North American continent, but the Queen smiles over it.
So maybe that was a specific choice.
I mean, I think the other thing I did think about afterwards, and I mean, she didn't have to be Canadian for this, but it kind of made her sort of foreignness, gave you the distance, is when she is living in Chelsea and she meets old Derek. Like, it's like she wasn't brought up there, so I don't know, like just there's a difference between how they, I don't know, the fact that she's seen as being attractive to him or as exotic to him, and she has to have that early experience for the rest of the, for the show to kind of like the book to
allows her to be a foreigner in both Britain and America.
Yeah, maybe.
I suppose, which is interesting. I mean, at times I just thought, knowing Fleming, he's probably got an axe to grind with Canadians.
Right. I was like, does he know someone that's based on someone, or I don't know? And then I was like, probably not.
The paragraph early on where it's sort of like Fleming's racist Tourette's kind of, like he lays into Canadian society and how classist it is, and then by the end of the paragraph he's talking about Lebanon, and I'm just like, he just got in that racist groove and couldn't get out of it. It's like, let me tell you about Lebanon. like an old racist uncle who's like,
he's like the one.
Shut him up.
Those moments though, they pop up and you're like, shut up, like, why is this relevant? Oh, it's not, you just have to tell us. But I mean, I guess also like the bit where she goes back to Canada to see the aunt before she goes on her journey, and she talks about how she used to think that, is it Montreal?
She is, yeah, she's Canadian.
Whichever, I can't remember which city it is she's from, but
yes, I think it's Montreal, and Bond comes from Toronto.
Right. But she's like, I used to think it was grandiose, but having been where there's real heritage and real culture, everything just looks like, a movie set. You're like, okay.
That says a lot. I think we've got to the bottom of why Fleming made the Canadian there. Is there any overall thoughts about the book before we dig in not chapter by chapter, but we start to
I mean, my sort of big takeaway at the end, I mean, I actually really did enjoy reading it, although it made me want to throw it across the room and made me laugh out loud. And it's kind of so, my responses to it were so extreme. Like parts where I thought, well, this is terrible. How could he write such terrible stuff? What an awful person. And then other parts where I was like, that's really great. That's amazing. Like, I mean, I really had very wide responses to it.
Welcome to the world of Ian Fleming.
Well, it's right.
There's no safe place in the Fleming book.
There's nowhere to hide.
Nowhere to hide, no.
Well, part of me is like, at first I was like, okay, so it's a female protagonist. Well, not even a protagonist, just a female first-person voice almost. And I'm like, I want to like her. I really want to like her. And I just think she's so dumb. Oh, what an idiot. And when she's in danger, I genuinely don't want bad things to happen to her. But, and I'm not going to say this because this is not what I mean at all. Like, she deserves it because she doesn't. Of course she doesn't.
But she's written so incompetently, you sort of...
You're an idiot. You're an absolute idiot. Like, no one would put themselves in that situation. Like, and to the point where after she's been through all that stuff that night, and she eventually, they all get sent off to their little motel rooms, and she falls dreamily and happily to sleep. I'm like, stay alert, you moron. Like, it's crazy. So I just found her deeply frustrating pretty much the whole way through.
Yeah, and I think, it to me, if this book has a noble project, which I think you can argue that it does, some of the ways in which she is characterized individually compromise that project of what I would say is a heartfelt, if ham-fisted, attempt to understand things from a woman's perspective.
Does he really think women are that incompetent?
Well, that's it. Once we get into the action later on, I thought, well, the smart choice would have been to sort of make her more active, make her have more agency in saving herself, because, as you said, she's the narrator, but she's not really the protagonist. Other people have to come in and do that job for her, and a smart, probably a more progressive way of doing that is to have her kind of be in control of her own fate. On the other hand, I do sort of think that, like, it's Fleming is sort of trying to say that she has no control over her own fate because she lives in a man's world, which is interesting. Yeah. But it's also a man writing it, and his own.
There is the one place where I felt I don't say she takes control necessarily, but where she goes to Switzerland for the abortion, and they try and like, oh, you should do this, you should do this, and she makes up this story about, well, no, because I know this person, I'm related to this, but she's like, I got my way, and she talks about hoodwinking them or something like that, and I was like, that's like the smartest she is in the whole book.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And just her acceptance of like what she should do. Oh, I better do this because I should.
And I think that that's where it all comes apart for me is that this idea of her representing this idea that if you're a woman in this period, and maybe even now, probably now too, sexual harassment is just something that you live with every day. And that book makes that very clear in a way that probably not a lot of books are at the time. That if you're a woman, this is what you have to deal with every day, and everyone just tells you to accept.
Right. Yeah.
Culturally condoned, but the fact that she's so quick to submit to all of that, makes me think, well, was that Fleming's intention? Was Fleming sort of saying you can avoid this if you're a bit smarter and a bit more?
I mean, maybe it was. She's so young at the beginning. I mean, she's 17 and a half, maybe 18, with Derek when he offs to Oxford. She's so young. But part of it's like that whole thing with Derek, which is this sort of formative relationship and losing her virginity and the horrible way in which it happens in like the cinema box. I mean, it's that whole like degrading. It almost has such a negative impact on her, and of course it's going to, but she doesn't sort of come back from it at all, really.
No, that's right. Yeah, no, I mean, she's shaped by her experiences of men, basically. And her own, even her experiences with other women are
not good. Like the ad and then
so there's
she comes out with.
Well, I mean, let's dig in, but before we do that, at this point, would you recommend the book to people?
I would. I don't know what my caveat would be.
But there is one.
There is one. I think it would be. It's Ian Fleming, the guy who wrote James Bond, who created James Bond, that guy. It's one of his, it's a later book, and it's kind of weird because there's not a lot of James Bond in it. In fact, James Bond doesn't come until the end, but there's a lot of action in it. It would be that, I think. But it's good. Like, I liked it. And I got annoyed with it. I think the fact that the fact that responses are so strong, I think is brilliant. Like, there's so much in our world these days because we just are absorbing information and TV and like online social media where we just kind of go and we skim, and like I felt like it's gonna sound so ridiculous when I say the words, I felt alive reading it.
I get it. I totally get it.
I felt like really like provoked in all sorts of ways, and I know that I told you this. I think I did. Maybe I just thought I did. I also listened to the audiobook of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is read by Rosamund Pike, who was herself in one movie. Can't remember which one. Who's an English actress. Which one?
Die Another Day.
Die Another Day. Well, English actress. She narrates the whole thing in a Canadian accent. She does all the accents. She does Slugsy. She does horror. She does Bond. She does them all.
Wow.
It's great. She does Derek. It's fantastic. Anyway, but the bit, the them section of the book where it's the action and it's dangerous and it's horrible. I had it on my I'm listening to it on audiobook, got my earpods in. I'm walking on the beach in Coronado, right, which is one of the most idyllic places on God's good earth. It's beautiful. The sun is going down. The hotel down. Children are running and playing, and I'm in my ears. I'm like,
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what to do. And I felt like almost paralyzed. Like I was like, the juxtaposition of what my body was feeling and seeing, like in terms of like the feel of the ocean spray, the wind, the smell of the sand. And then what I was hearing was so extreme. I was like, this was not a good idea. So I ended up like stopping it and going and sitting in my car to get to the end of that section, because I was like, it was too much of like a sensory overload.
I mean, it's I always love. I mean, I got through these books very quickly when I was doing a lot of traveling, and I think that's the best way to read them as well. You weren't traveling, but if you think about it, like someone reading this even in the 50s and 60s, reading a Bond novel would have been in that exact situation. You know, they would have taken it with them on holiday.
Playing on a train.
Yeah, and somewhere like the Hotel they'd be sit. So it's probably that, you know, that exact juxtaposition of whether it's reading scenes like that, or, you know, scenes of genital torture, you'd be like, da, 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 you know. I mean, that's what it would have been, you know.
Yeah.
You know, all the horrible psychosexual torture in Doctor No. People were like, la, 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 kids running around.
The kids are building sandcastles. I'll just read a little bit of, you know, like near-death experience.
That's a very authentic way to experience.
I mean, literally, I kind of stopped and I realized I was going, like, I don't know what my face was doing, but I'm sure I was like holding my breath and had some sort of tortured expression on my face. And then I was like, I have to sit down. I mean, it was weird. But yeah, I think that's what's so brilliant about it, is like how I really, 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 I felt more like emotionally like pulled and stretched as somebody who was engaged in the story, as much as somebody who was getting distracted by the writing too. You know, it was kind of all different directions. But I would recommend it totally.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this specifically, but it's entering a very, what I think is one of the reasons why I shifted right here. It's because we're entering. This is the tail end of the Ian Fleming James Bond cycle. There's only a few more books after this. And we're starting to enter a very self-aware phase of the Bond books, when there's a real sense of I think sort of, you know, Fleming knows what this is now, and he wants to mess it up.
Yeah.
He wants people to sort of, he wants people to respond differently to Bond again. Like everyone's become too comfortable of the idea of what Bond is, and of course, with the movies coming out, that will cement that even further. And this, to me, is like, you know, it feels almost bratty in the way it's like, this is not what, you know, what that's not what Bond is. Bond is this, you know. It's sort of, and the next few books, just to give you some context, and then in the next 3 books, they murder his wife, they leave him for dead, and turn him into a traitor.
Oh.
So
trifecta.
This is the beginning of bad Bond. This is like, Bond is not a hero anymore. And I think this book is like the turning point of, hey, imagine if Bond wasn't the hero of the book. I mean, he isn't in this, you know.
Yeah.
Not, because he's hardly in it, and it's not his story. But
Yeah.
The next few books double down on this quite significantly to sort of say, hey, this guy that you took for granted as a good guy, you know, we're going to do some horrible things to him, and we're going to enjoy doing it. It's why I kind of jumped here a little bit, because Daniel Craig, when he started playing, before he started playing Bond, after he was announced, before he started filming Casino Royale, he read all the James Bond books. And he said the thing that struck him most was how the books went on. Fleming fell out of love with James Bond. And the last few books are just like sadistically doing things to Bond that would hurt him. And it's so true. I mean, that's if you read them in, you know, not many people have sort of read them as a serial. As a serial, and they get more serialized as it goes on from this point onwards.
Do you know the musical City of Angels?
No.
So it's a Cy Coleman, David Zappel musical. It's brilliant. It's from the early 1990s. One of my all-time favorite musicals, but it's set in film noir Hollywood.
Oh.
And so it's a novelist who writes, detective private eye novels, and his novel is being made into a movie. And so it's sort of the process of that. But it's the actors who are in it, apart from the guy who is the writer, who's called Stein, and his private eye, who is Stone, they're played by different actors. But everybody else in the book plays two characters, one in Hollywood life and one in the movie. And so the musical is in both color and in black and white. So when you're staging it, you got to, it's really clever. But without, again, spoiler alert, but and you don't, the whole time when it starts, you think you're watching this movie that's a film noir, in a musical, and then they start, like, the actors start acting backwards, and and then you realize, and you get these scenes going back and forth. But it gets to just before intermission, Stone, the private eye, steps out of the black and white and confronts Stein in the color. And I love that idea. Just when you were saying that, I was like, this idea of, like, James Bond is doing all this stuff, and Ian Fleming's like, dude.
Yeah. Which is kind of where it started. I mean, it's where it all started with Bond. The other book we've covered on this club is Casino Royale, and there's a sense of a dislocation between Fleming and Bond in there, that Bond is sort of seen as this person you shouldn't try to be, and that it becomes a more conventional hero as it goes on, and this is the return of that, almost that sense of looked at from someone else's perspective,
right?
You should aspire to be,
right?
And I think, and the next few books are all about that, and this is we'll talk about this in a minute, but this is where Fleming sort of inserts himself as a writer into the novels for the first time. It's the first time he sort of says, "Hey, basically, I'm this guy's Watson.
Yes.
This guy's real, and I'm writing up his adventures." And, like, we've never heard that before, but it comes back again and again.
It's like taking control of it almost.
Yeah. It's sort of saying, like, well, I mean, in some way, it's like the vanity of refocusing. This is my creation.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's also, I think it's the beginning of a process of putting Bond out to pasture.
Right. Maybe. That makes sense. I mean, the prologue is crazy, and the book, the copy that I read doesn't have the prologue in it. So when you said, "Oh, let's talk about the prologue," I was like, "What prologue?" And then I thought, "Oh, maybe you mean the first third." And then, of course, I found out that there is this crazy ass prologue, and I was like, "What is he doing by saying, like exactly like you say, being the Watson?"
Yeah.
And saying, "I'm just chronicling the adventures of this person who exists in real life." And
he
thrown across my desk.
This landed on my desk. It involved James Bond, who is someone that I already write about, so I agreed to publish it. It changes the game in so many, like, we've never had this meta level before in the books, and when he's left for dead at the end of You Only Live Twice, M's obituary sort of says, "There's this guy going around writing about him." So when he's in his obituary for the Times, he sort of said, "You probably heard of him because this guy keeps going around writing about James Bond."
Yeah, like I love that like the meta, this sort of insertion of oneself into one's art. Like it's like that fourth wall.
It doubles down on. I mean, it also doubles down on something. So it's a brand new thing, which I think is excellent.
Yeah.
It's like. And the fact that we get more of this in the rest of the series is nice too. But it's kind of old school. It's kind of an acknowledgement that he's. We talked, Michael Shantz and I, when we talked about Casino Royale in the last meeting, we're basically talking about how he is, whatever he's doing, he's breaking the Official Services Act, like the Secrets Act, not Services Act.
Yeah, it says here. Hang on, I have it. you probably have it too. I was interested in this view of James Bond through the wrong end of the telescope, so to speak, and after obtaining clearance for certain minor infringements of the Official Secrets Act, I have much pleasure in sponsoring its publication.
So, we commented in Casino Royale, it's sort of like, it's unapologetically saying this is what's going, this is what the Secret is in a level of detail that must be breaking the Official Secrets Act. And I love the fact that, he's finally got to grips with that oh yeah, I probably shouldn't be talking about intelligence before the D notice comes up in like years. So there's a great deal of self-awareness there that I really like, but also all the even in Casino Royale, the first book, he's giving the game away.
Yeah.
Like, think about all the secrets he's blown over the past 10 years of writing these books. unless they're all in his imagination, which, he's enough of a narcissist for that to be true, I think. A lot of...
Did he work in espionage?
Yeah, he was in naval intelligence during
spycraft, as I like to call it. Spycraft. Yeah, I mean, that's what he's good at, right? That's the thing. It's like you're like, he really knows that stuff.
But he was also so this. I mean, when you read a bit more about Fleming, there's people either think he was really involved in naval intelligence, like he was part of some of the most important espionage missions of World War II, and there are others who think he was a fantasist who sat behind a desk and came up with a lot of plans, but nothing he did ever contributed to the war. So it could have gone, I mean, and when you read the books, you're like, well, either of those are totally possible.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't. It doesn't matter, but just he's certainly very flagrant about how much he's saying, this is what's going on, guys.
Right.
The way that, I mean, if you think of John le Carre or Len Dayton or like other people who've it sort of seems like this is what on a realist level what's going on in the Secret Service, more than it does when you read a Bond book. But you sort of think, I don't know, those guys, maybe they're just better writers, like they can make it seem like it's more real.
Or maybe he bigs it up to hide the fact that he really knows.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows? I just wonder, because I mean, he's so good at that stuff, like on whatever level of bondiness it is. Mm-hmm. Like it's you give yourself in to believe it. Like this is the only book I've read, so it's hard to take it off this, but just on the movies, you're like, I don't know if there's a cue. Or you know what I mean? It's like this pen, but it's like you just buy into it and go out and down. This world could work. This world could exist.
Well, that's what makes me sometimes the lies, if they are lies and fantasies, they're so specific. They seem worth investigating, like the white goods scam. Mm-hmm. So it seems like it's like, maybe this is true. Like maybe this is something that people, it's like, I can't imagine it is, but maybe it is because it's so specific. Right. Why would you make up that lie? We've talked a little bit about, I mean, you laid it out brilliantly. This is the two big differences of the narration of this book from other Bond books are that the narrator is female and it's first person. So normally we get second person, omniscient, kind of a mix of the two, narration, and it's, I guess it's not gendered specifically, but it really is, it's skewed towards Bond's view of things. Although, we did see a little bit of Vesper's perspective in Casino Royale now and again, which is why this is kind of like a nice segue into that. But that's what what does that narration do for the book? And I suppose, what might what might it do against it?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, Tom. I think it works.
The answer, by the way.
I don't have an answer, to be honest. I mean, I think in some ways it works both ways. you know, to get inside the head of somebody, and so that when that person is in danger later on in the book, you feel like you're inside her head. But I don't think I really did, even though it's in first person. Some places I felt like it was in third person because it was so descriptive, and you know, but when she
just gave up.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's hard to say, like, as a grown-up lady in 2021 reading it. I mean, I don't know if it was the same as a woman reading it in the 60s or a man reading it in the 60s, you know, when it came out, or even how a man now would read it. You know, the more enlightened gentleman, the quiche eating, you know, generation, whatever you want to call it, would be
that.
horrified.
That's straight from View to a Kill, by the way. The scene where Roger Moore cooks a quiche.
Did I just make a Bond illusion without realizing?
He cooks a quiche for it was a moment of great. It was like a real turning point. I think masculinity in the Bond films, where Roger Moore cooks a quiche for his conquest, showing he's a modern man. Anyway.
Oh my god. But as a woman reading it, you know, there's so many parts in it where you just go, that's not accurate. You know. But at the same time, you're like, but it's okay, I'll go with it because it's Fleming doing it and he's trying. He's trying. So there's a sort of forgiveness about.
Oh, bless his cotton socks.
But like all like the sex, I mean, this is pretty freaking explicit, this book. And I don't know if the others are as bad as this, but I was like, wait a minute, what am I reading here? You know.
You're not you're totally on the money there, because you know, one of the things I want to talk about is very striking here is like sex and self-censorship. This is considered one of the more explicit Bond novels, and it's one of the reasons why Fleming considered it a misfire, was it because he'd always kind of prided himself on running rings around the censors and kind of alluding to sex and violence and other unseemly things in a way that would get past the readers and the censors. Like, for instance, in Casino Royale, he has a scene of genital torture where he doesn't mention genitals or torture. Like, it's all literally all in the mind of the person.
Yeah.
But you know exactly what's happening. And there are moments like this in here where you're like, well, that's two people having sex. He's not saying it directly, but then you get when Bond and Vivienne have sex later on in the book. I was like, he's describing an orgasm.
Yeah.
He's not making any bones about it. So,
but even like at the beginning with Derek, you know, when they the hand job scene, where I can't remember exactly how she describes it, but I literally was like, did you ask somebody and that's how they described it? You thought, oh, that's what women think, you know, I'm just going to pop that in. Or he'd read it somewhere. And I was like, you should have talked to at least 10 women and then decided how you were going to describe that. Oh, you don't describe it.
There's no evidence he had did that amount of research, is there?
Because it's literally, I was like, oh, please, like Mills and Boone, like, and not even good Mills and Boone. Do you know what I mean? Oh, Harlequin for our American listeners. I was like, that's bad. Like, yeah. So there's stuff like that where you're just like, I don't think I've ever met any woman who would describe their orgasm the way she describes that. I'm just like, and so it takes you out of it, and it kind of made me kind of not want to forgive his writing at that point. I was like, that's just lazy.
I got so one of my talking points, you know, as you've already picked up, is you know, to ask, not that you're speaking for all women, of course, but
I couldn't possibly
ask a woman, you know, like ask a woman point blank. It's like, is any of this what you're thinking?
Not remotely.
Because I don't think, you know, my sense is no, but I don't know for sure without, you know, actually consulting people who it affects.
So there's several places where I just was like, dude, so off the money. So that was one. The other one is when she gets all gussied up in her like Vespa outfit, and she's going to head over the border, and she's like, I know that I look really great, and I have a bit of a sex part or something. And I'm like, really? Nope. And then later on when she, what is it she says? But it's when she's smoking. It's like after all the like, stuff with Slugsy and horror, and then she goes and has a moment where she has a cigarette and she's smoking, it like calms her down, and you're just like, and she to the point where she forgets and starts thinking of another life. It's like, I mean, that's not, maybe because she's so psychologically scarred, she has some sort of emotional disconnect and her brain shuts down. Maybe it's that, which I could understand, where you're so in trauma, but that's not how he describes it. It's like she has a cigarette and then she feels feminine again. And you're just like, yeah. So there's things like that, which are kind of annoying. And then I got annoyed, not that it's not real. Well, I don't know if it's realistic or not, because the whole situation is unrealistic. But like when Bond corners the two guys and they're holding the televisions, and he gets her to go and he's like, hold the gun up against his back, do this, get his, and she just totally like messes it up. And I'm like, actually, that's probably what I would do.
Oh,
in fact, I wouldn't do it. I'd be like, no, fucking do it yourself. I'm not going near them.
I mean, I don't know if that's as much because I feel that way too. I don't know if that's as much as gender as like not being in dangerous situations a lot.
But like how she behaves, I mean, I've never been in that sort of situation, so it would be very hard to say. But just how she behaves in that situation is so, I'd be terrified. And she sort of is. And well, maybe it's because she's describing it and it's in retrospect and I don't know. But I feel like the genuine sense of terror isn't there. And the whole thing about, well, we'll talk about that later, but she's about to be brutally and horribly raped. And just
basically every man in her life has done that to her.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, I mean, it's not quite that meh, but it didn't. I felt like I was like, you're not. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because my sense is that this is a mansplainy version of what you think women are thinking, but at the same time, like the abstract things it's saying about, what women have to deal with in terms of sexual harassment, that it's a boys club out there, that, on one hand, there are men, who just want to get you into bed. And then, on the other hand, there are people who are just slut shaming you all the time. You get a lot of that. It's like those things are all like quite, and, like, I'm not going to say progressive, but I'm going to say like, a view of the world that we would hold up today and recognize as a truer version of what it's like to live in the masculine sphere of.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I think the fact that after all of that stuff, that he's trying. I mean, and that's my whole thing of like, I kind of forgive him in a way, not like he needs my forgiveness, but you know what I mean? But like to go, thank you for trying almost. I'm not going to say thank you. I'm just going to say, you tried. All right. But like after all that whole night that they end up having sex at the end, I'm like, I don't think I'd be up for that, frankly. I'm like, dude, I'm a little traumatized. Can we just get out of here? Like, oh, let's shower together. It's like,
yeah, and it's sort of, I think James Bond's only in a third of this book, but when he's in the book, it effectively becomes a James Bond book, like just by the events of what it follows a pretty. Once we get from that point, it's a pretty standard car chases, sex, and seduction. We get there.
It's like what he does in a whole book, he does in like 9 pages.
Yeah. He tells you what the mission he's just been on. By the way, sounds great. I don't know why they didn't make that into a Bob book.
He does tell you all about it, so it's okay.
On this really exciting mission, I'm just going to relate it to you verbally. So we're not going to actually see it.
Well, I mean, that's a whole other thing when we talk about time in the novel, because but they sit down with the hoodlums, your hooligans, right there. And they sit at a table and he tells this entire story of this mission that he's been on in total earshot, right? Yeah. And you're like, you're giving away your secrets, but also there's no time to talk about this, James.
Yeah. At that point, I'm sort of like, I think that's the point where it dawned on Fleming that people are going to want something
You're
like
gonna want some James Bondiness in this. Yeah, totally.
a pound of Bond flesh somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And she just listens to it. And of course, what does she do when she hears him? Wow, he's amazing.
Yeah.
I'd be like, dude, if you're that good a spy, get us out of here.
Yeah, and you know, I remember reading that it's never registered before me, but that section I think forms the basis of the movie version of The Living Daylights, actually.
Oh, really?
I
Which
just
one? Timothy Dalton one?
Yeah, it's the first Dalton one, and it's like it's a KGB defector and all that sort of stuff.
Is that one with the cello? I can't remember what happens in it, but I know there's a cello.
Oh, a cello plays a huge part.
But they don't. They go on like a.
It's the MacGuffin, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they go over the Austrian border in a cello.
Lynching on a cello. Let me tell you, the cello wouldn't make it, but that's all right.
It's the MacGuffin of the whole thing, you know. It's like how he finds out that who's behind that. Anyway, but I thought, you know, because I was looking for things that, you know, the blanket statement is they never adapted this into any of the movies, and so I was like, oh well, this is kind of Jaws and this is kind of Sandor, and I think they pocketed it from the Living Daylights film, which would not be above where they were at that point. I mean, you mentioned time in the book, and the Bond movies are so rigidly chronological, and the Fleming novels really aren't. They time shift.
Yeah.
Even Casino Royale, you know, starts a third of the way through story. They flash back to the beginning, and then they go on. I mean, what did that strike you? Did that strike you? That time?
It sort of did. I think the thing I really enjoyed is that it says that the book begins right at the very beginning. It says it's Friday, October the 13th. It's the 13th, Friday the 13th, which I was like, oh, nice.
I didn't even quote.
Bad things are gonna happen. It's right at the very beginning of the prologue. Second paragraph. I started on September 1st, and it was now Friday, October 13th.
Go.
Like, oh, there you go. So the whole event takes place on Friday the 13th through the night, which is kind of cool, right?
Two characters called Horror and Slugsy.
Horror and Slugsy.
Friday the 13th.
I mean, I was like, Slugsy. Just saying it is Slugsy. And the thing is with horror, when you say it with an English accent, it's horror. But of course, the American is a horror. So it was funny listening to the audiobook with Rosamund Pike, because she's like, horror. And I was like, what's his name? Horror. I'm like, let me just check. Was it horror? Horror. But no, it's interesting. So just that, then the flashbacks with, I kind of quite like that. I was like, oh, nice device. I get it. When you get a sense of, like, you know, that whole first section that's about her, so you know who she is. But it's when she's 17, 18 maybe, but 17, with the whole thing with Derek. And then she's only a little bit older when she gets her job with, what's his name? Oh, no, she's at the Clarion, isn't she? She's at the Clarion for 2 years.
Yeah. And
she literally says, I spent my time at the Chelsea Clarion for 2 years. And then, so I guess she's 20, maybe 21 when she works for Kurt. Mm-hmm. And then she has to stick with Kurt while he's engaged to Truda, and then breaks off his engagement with Truda so she can then sleep with him and then get a abortion. And so I guess she's about 23 doing a little flashback. But that whole thing was like, oh, okay, I see, you know, that made sense. But then once you get into the like run of it, it's fast. And it's only when they refer to it, she goes, I looked at my clock and it was 2 a.m. Oh my gosh, I didn't know what time it was. And you're like, thanks for reminding us, Ian Fleming. It's very Shakespeare, isn't it? I see that yonder sun comes up on, like, it was one of those moments where he's giving us a little clue. But it happens super fast.
Yeah.
I mean, reading it probably didn't take me 5 hours to read it, but I read it faster than that. But I guess a lot of sitting and waiting. And there's a lot of coffee drinking and a lot of making of eggs.
Oh, well.
And that takes time.
You won't be surprised to learn that the cooking of eggs is a big deal in any Fleming book.
I think we talked about it in Moonraker.
Yeah, no, I added it. So it's in the short story Bond in New York. So just the short story. I was going to say the James Bond short story. It's not James. It is Ian Fleming journalistic report of his time of a visit to New York, which he said he put James Bond instead of Ian Fleming to get it sold.
Right.
He went to New York, did a bunch of he's saying James Bond because it's in like a faint espionage. Ian Fleming went to New York and he sort of says, I went to the I think it's the big hotel in New York. Plaza, that's it. So I went to the Plaza and the chef was making scrambled how. So here's my recipe for making scrambled eggs. It's in the story, but in one way or another, it's really. I like in the Bond film. I don't remember. You never see Bond eat an egg. Any of the Bond movies, you don't see. It's not like you never see Sean Connery sitting down and say, "Oh, great, scrambled eggs." You never see it. You never see Pierce Brosnan with with an egg in his mouth.
Yeah, fried egg sandwich, please. He makes. I think I'm right. I think she makes scrambled eggs 3 times that night.
So scrambled eggs is a huge thing. And Ian Fleming, I remember there's a BBC interview with Ian Fleming and there with this Brett Hole on the GoldenEye Ranch. Talk to about the James Bond. Many people think that James Bond is based on me because I like scrambled eggs. And so obviously, like this is the Fleming part of Bond, writ large. Weirdly, by the way, that recipe for scrambled eggs is the recipe for a heart attack.
It's like butter, right? It's like
butter. It's like he basically says, if ever in doubt, put some butter. And then he says at the end, if you don't want to put butter in, put some cream in. Good.
That was by the time she was making the 3rd set of eggs, I was like, what's happening? But that was the thing with time, though. And I mean, not just like time as a function in the book, but and as a device of how he uses time, but just my sense of like urgency for her. It's like, dude, Vivian, get a sense of urgency here. And she's just like, oh, I'll just scramble some eggs. I mean, granted, once she's told to, but the rest of the time she seems to just do it because I don't know. She's like, oh, there's some eggs, so I'll scramble them. I don't know. I just thought it was really weird.
Especially where you're like, where's James Bond? Where is he?
Oh, the whole time.
Where? Yeah, well, the whole time. But I don't know. The sort of once the sort of flashback caught up with the present tense, I was like, well, the person walking through the door is clearly Bond. I was like, oh no, it's 2 gentlemen called Horror and
Horror.
And we're gonna have to wait a couple more chapters before Bond
turns up. Well, the other thing as well, like talking about like sort of the difference between those sleek Cold War, those evil Eastern European / Russians, but in America, the best you're gonna get when it comes to bad guys, Slugsy and Horror.
It's so true. It's really strange to me because Fleming is such an Americanist. Like I already said the thing. I already told you the story about him. His idolization of the CIA as the idea of like this is where intelligence. Felix Leiter is a love letter to American intelligence. That whole character is about. This is where we should be. This is where Britain should be. But when it comes to sort of gangsters, like sort of representing organized crime, it's like he just picked up Tintin in America. That's fine. I'll just do that. The other thing that's made me think of is like he saw the movie Key Largo.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's what it is. and it's like, I don't know. I don't know, and I haven't done the research around it, but I don't think of early 1960s America as this hotbed of 1930s style Al Capone gangsterism.
Right.
But that's how he depicts it. And Horror and Slugsy are straight out of Public Enemy or...
Oh, completely.
It's like...
Made me think of the, I mean, they're not the most, but they're not that incompetent, you know. They're not there to, they're there to go and burn down a building, basically. But it made me think of like the two guys.
It's an insurance fire. That's
insurance fire. Like even I could do that, you know, but like, it made me think of the two guys from 101 Dalmatians who have to like kidnap the Dalmatians in the van.
Cruella, so yeah, absolutely. Horror.
You know, Mr. Sanguinetti or whatever he's called is like sitting at back with white hair and black hair, like in a big fur made out of Dalmatian skin.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, again, just a little bit of Bond book context is a lot of people see this as a kind of sequel to Diamonds Are Forever, the book Diamonds Are Forever, which is, well, Bond goes back to America again. And he's involved in like, with organized crime. And it's the same thing. It's like, he's watched some 1930s gangster movies and he thinks it's kind of the same in the film. Yeah. And yeah. But this, just the fact that they're called Horror and Slugsy makes it seem even that cartoonish.
It's brilliant though, right? I loved that. I thought I was like, no doubt who they are.
No, I mean, it's interesting because it is, he, you know, like works so hard on the specifics of some characters. So like, you know, like the social reality of some characters is very clear. Yeah. And then there's Horror and Slug, who, as you say, I think if you saw this in a Looney Tunes cartoon, you'd be like, a bit on the nose.
Right. Well, it's like, you know, you've got your Derek and your Oxbridge set and your parties in Chelsea and how that's depicted. And you're right. It's, I mean, awful though he's the worst. It's awful though Derek is, but like it's somebody you kind of know. You're like, yeah, he's believable. And then these guys are literally like drawn with a Blackwing pencil. It's kind of interesting, but you know.
Let's talk about bad men, because this is one of the most interesting aspects of the book for me, is how horrific the men in this book are.
Are there any good men in the book?
Not even the cop at the end. That's where I thought they were gonna say.
Not even the Vespa salesman.
They all want to get in her pants.
They do. And is she that hot? I don't know. Doesn't matter.
I genuinely think it's like, I think it's Ian Fleming's mental extrapolation of like, this is what I want to do to women all the time. All men must be the same. And I think that's where his mind is making this happen. But I also think in an accidentally he's sort of right. Like that sort of, I don't mind that the men in this book are so one-dimensional, because, you know.
Well, it's not like we're asked to identify with them or like them. So that, you know, it's like someone has to play the bad guy. He just has lots of bad guys, you know, and we don't like any of them, and that's actually a good thing. So
yeah, it's like men will always let you down.
Yeah,
is the theme of this book, and you know, I'm sure a lot of women would say the same thing. It would be nice if there was like one, and you think Bond is going to be that.
When Bond is like the shining example of a good man, it's like, oh, he's the best one.
Yeah, and he still ditches her and uses her.
And that casual attitude to sex and to women and the misogyny and all the rest of it. But he's the best one.
I suppose so.
Really?
Yeah, I know. It's not very hard, though, is it? I mean, it's
a very low bar.
From rape to semi-rape.
As Fleming indeed writes. Yeah, it's a very, very low bar. Like they're all awful. Like
start with Derek, who is, I mean, he's just trying to.
He's a horny teen.
Yeah, I mean, it's Derek. So Derek is. I mean, I can see why. Like Derek is. There are numerous occasions in this book where I think like, somewhat when even though Bond is not in it, there are the men in the book are different aspects of Bond.
Right.
Sort of like, if you just you take this part of Bond and you extrapolate it into a person, that's Derek, or if you do that, and that's Kurt, and I think that's kind of what he's going for.
That's a really great way to think of it, because I was kind of like, at first when I was reading it, I thought, oh, maybe it's young Bond when I read it, and then I was like, oh, it's not.
Great, that would be great. Yeah.
But that was when I was thinking flashback. I was like, maybe she's like really old, and then I'm like, no, Vanessa. But the whole like Oxbridge thing and the like privilege and the sense of entitlement.
Yes, absolutely.
I think is really interesting.
I was just, I mean, not, again, don't feel the need to thank Ian Fleming, but
it's all right.
I agree with you, but I sort of think like there's never any pretense that someone like Derek would be any other way.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that. Like I mean, it's not it's not necessarily true. Like that's the norm, but there are exceptions to the norm. But it's sort of this sense of like, well, no, he really is that conniving, and he really is that duplicitous.
Like all of his like wooing of her, like from like we're gonna go on a boat ride on the Thames, and I'm gonna take this record player with, and it's all and you're like, but then like when he dumps her. He goes off to Oxford and he writes this letter 2 months later, 2 weeks later, 2 months later, something later. And he,
Madame Bovary with the fake tear,
Right.
I gotta get tears on the page.
This letter's so difficult for me to write. I'm like, whatever, Derek. But then he sends her like a crate of pink champagne. I'm just like, oh my God, you're the worst. Like, but he thinks that's enough. There's something about, but I feel like I know that person. Like, yeah. I feel like I've met that person.
I don't know. I don't know. I've known many German people in my life. I don't know if I've known any Germans as German as Kurt.
Yeah, Kurt's pretty living the cliche, isn't he? Really.
I mean, it's like when he starts getting described in terms of Nazis, I'm like, oh God, I can't do this anymore. I just can't.
I was like, oh, Fleming at that point.
Like, why can't they just be post-war efficiency? Like I know that German. I don't want to think of like,
yeah. He really is like, yeah. I mean, yeah, Kurt's awesome. I mean, it's just so. There's no room for any sort of nuance there, is there really?
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you were reading it in 2021 when we have the paradigm of toxic masculinity to go to, you're like, oh, this guy is this kind of toxic masculinity. This guy is kind of toxic. It's like really easy to put these people into brackets that we understand.
There's a great bit as well, which I thought was brilliant. It's like, this is how he's describing Kurt, where it's a bit where Kurt is talking to Viv about when he's married to Truda. And he's like, we're going to have a honeymoon where we'll have loads of sex. And then we'll be having sex on Wednesday nights only, or something like. I can't remember what it is, because that's what we do. Because otherwise, I'll be spent and it won't be good. And you're like, I was like, is that a German thing, or is that, I don't know? Is that how Fleming? I can't find it, but it was hilarious. But I'm like, is that how he sees?
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely. I mean, you were in the Moonraker serial that I did, and you do get a sense in that book that he's not willing to let the past go when it comes to World War II and Nazism, and just assumes that any German in the post-war world is essentially a Nazi in disguise. And I think that's kind of what he's going for here.
That why Truda dumps him.
Yeah, it's it's like it's just, I suppose in the course of the book, it's like, here's the guy that's different from Derek,
Yeah.
same as Derek, and this, this pinball goes back and forth. It's like, obviously, it's like, I guess there's nothing about horror and Slugsy that you would, but they're just like the same tendencies but laid bare as animal, the animal version of that. And then Bond comes in and he seemed like the sort of Lancelot figure, but he ends up doing the same.
Yeah, Bond does spend most of the time with his shirt off as well, which is like running around with his shirt off in the middle of the night. And I was, okay, it's like, because he doesn't want to get it dirty. Oh, is it his jacket? No, it's his shirt. He takes his shirt off. There's a bit where he's running shirtless, and I was, so that's, but like, just when you said animalistic, that's what made me think of it there. It's like there's something very primal.
Yeah.
About the men in the book, and very much in it, and they're driven by sex or by desire, sexual desire. She just happens to come across all these guys one after another, which is really unfortunate. Mm-hmm. But like even the fancies too, like Mrs. Fancy, well, Mr. Fancy, of course, who thinks it's fine to just, grope her whenever he walks past her, and Mrs. Fancy just is like, oh, she's like, oh, he does, oh, my husband.
Yeah, and I like that dimension of it, that everyone puts up with it, because that's something that we understand now. But it's pointed out. And I mean, I just to sort of shift the discussion to something which I wondered if you saw in this as much as I did, and I might be, as someone who's like a Bond movie and a Bond book nut at the same time, this might just be me, but did you feel like Ian Fleming had an axe to grind with cinema and TV in the same way that I did? It's never represented in a good way.
I feel like when I was skimming the Google finds, and now I can't remember where I saw this because I didn't write it down. And I probably should have stored it somewhere because it could have been useful. And I'm not making it up. I just can't remember what the context was, whether it was true or whether somebody just suggested it. But is that he had a situation where he was trying to have sex with somebody. Maybe he was losing his virginity. Maybe it was just trying to have sex with somebody in a box in a cinema.
Right. Yeah.
Court.
Taken from his experience. Yeah. No, I read that too.
Yeah, so the idea is that like the thing that happens to Derek and Viv, where like the light floods in and they're like, oh God, we're being caught, and how he was scarred by that, and for some reason after that he hates cinema, or the buildings that are cinemas. I don't know, but yeah, the television thing is weird too. I mean, I don't know. The only thing I wouldn't say it just jumped out, but that he has an axe to grind necessarily, but just that moment there where I thought, why I mean, I just thought, oh, they're in a cinema because it's somewhere that's private, and then of course she's like, everybody could hear us, and I was like, or maybe people just go on dates to cinemas because that's where you go to woo someone. I didn't think about it. But then just the stuff at the end where they talked about the fancies taking literally everything away, and then suddenly Slugsy and Horror are holding television sets, and my thought wasn't like, what's Fleming thinking here? My thought was just like, where'd they get them from? So I don't know, but I mean, there must be, if you're seeing that, maybe there's stuff.
I mean, it's possible you can read too much into it. It's also possible that you kind of know too much about how Fleming feels about those things from other books.
Yeah, if it's on his mind, it could just come through and you just see it because you've seen it.
He does. I know from other books that he finds television vulgar. He was obviously burned by television in selling the rights to doing a very bad job. And I think, a lot of the anxiety he has about what this movie series of Bond books is going to be is like almost projected onto the book. It's like the cinema as a place of sleaze, and he uses terms like nasty little movie set, and it just seems.
Oh.
I think he's kind of worried that it's just like, I think he's just kind of worried about where where Bond's going to go in the cinematic world. I don't know. And maybe that is reading too much into it, but I just find it very striking that cinema's always even to the point where he sort of mentions in that cinema sex scene, he mentions Cary Grant.
Oh yeah, he does. There's like the guy who runs the cinema, like the cinema manager, I guess. Like he just even how he talks is like unsophisticated, gruff, very working class. And what does he do? He refers to like Vivian as something. But it's like, oh, dirty little something, or like he doesn't even say no, let's not have this happen again, and not in my, he sort of is like degrading and shouting obscenities at her, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, it didn't strike me that particularly Fleming had an axe to grind, but then I don't know because I don't have the context really to compare it to. But when you say that does make sense.
Or just, I mean, it's so specific with like to mention Cary Grant in the book.
Yeah.
The same year that Dr. No comes out, knowing that Fleming wanted Cary Grant to be James Bond, and it ended up being Sean Connery. I just to me, it started. I was like, oh, Fleming's worried. And the great thing, I suppose, from his perspective, from our perspective, is that after the movies came out, he got on board with Sean Connery in a way that is just beyond what anyone might expect, to the point where from this point onwards, Bond is Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Like the way he's described, his ethnicity, everything is Sean Connery. So clearly he saw the movie and was like, oh, okay.
He got a paycheck and was like, okay.
Well, yeah, no, I don't think it's even that. I think it's just like, oh, this guy's too working class to play James Bond. And then he saw him and it's like, oh yeah,
it works. Actually, yeah.
He got it. So I'm going to make him Scottish. From now on.
James Bond develops.
Well, I'm going to make him Scottish. I'm going to describe him exactly how Sean Connery looks. It's like, if like Fleming sort of, he was he loved Hitchcock's movies and Hitchcock loved Bond novels. So it was a mutual exchange of things. And I think Hitchcock said at one point, like, I'm going to stop using Cary Grant and start using Sean Connery. Like, Cary Grant's getting too old. Let's, like it was like that. And Fleming couldn't see that transition. Hitchcock did, and then Fleming did, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this guy is." Just because he was a milkman at one point doesn't mean he can't play James Bond.
He was a milkman.
He was a milkman, and if you like the only thing Connery will sort of say about meeting Fleming is sort of like he was a snob, and he treated me like all the snobs I've ever known.
Yeah.
But the proof is in the pudding of the books. When every time he's described since, it's like, actually Bond is older than I put in the beginning, and he's got bigger eyebrows, and he's shot.
He used to be a milkman.
I mean, this is an interesting in the Bond book timeline. This is a really pivotal point, because he even says when he finally arrives in the book, he sort of says, "You may have heard about Operation Thunderball. I was kind of involved in that." It's a very dickish way of saying it. Yeah. A fringe player in that whole Thunderball thing. So this is like in the middle of like an ongoing story.
Yeah.
Thunderball. There's like a trilogy of books. And I completely forgot this. I was like, it's like Thunderball, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and You Only Live Twice, so like a Blofeld trilogy. Something Blofeld. But this is like in the middle of it.
Right in the middle of it. It's like fan fiction. It's like someone else wrote it.
It's fan fiction. That's exactly what it is.
Its own fan fiction.
It's his own self-written fan fiction.
You don't get more meta than that, do you? Really? I mean,
that's kind of exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's interesting though. That's really interesting. That whole thing with like Sean Connery too.
Hmm.
I didn't know that. I read or I'd heard that he didn't want Sean Connery to play it, but I didn't realize how much he'd gotten behind. I just said gotten. Oh my God, I'm turning into an American speaker. But how much he had got behind the idea of Sean Connery as Bond.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, he got. It's interesting because he was really not happy about it. And I just think that he's obviously got a lot of access to crime in a lot of different ways, but for some reason I was like, oh, movies. Doctor No's coming out this year.
It could very well be. I mean, it's that thing of like all those sort of intertextual references that you have that I just don't have.
Yeah.
So all these things are going to be firing up to you, and I'm just like, oh, he doesn't like cinemas very much. Why are those men carrying televisions? It's like that was as far as I got with that one.
Well, he's always had a thing. He's always had a thing about television being a communist thing, which I've never quite understood. But he does sort of, he kind of equates the two quite readily. It's like
it's a metaphor.
The end for British society.
Yeah.
Is television. Let's talk genre because
haven't we just nailed that on the head? It's fan fiction, dude.
It's fan fiction. There you go. That's a good. I mean, in the last meeting we talked about, is this a good thriller? I'm not even making the assumption that this is a thriller because for large parts of it, it's clearly not that.
No, it's
Mills and Boon, Harlequin.
It's the most, what's the word? Schizophrenic book I can think of that I've ever read. It's too many things because it's Mills and Boon at some points. It's travel guide. It's product placement commercial. It's the Da Vinci Code. It's a little bit of James Bond. It's so many things.
The James Bond bit of the book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, it's almost, and like that first person, it's a little, I was a Bridget Jones' Diary at one point.
Yeah, and I mean, Rosamund Pike was in the movie version of Gone Girl, and that reminded me of that even. That sort of, it's fascinating. It's real.
It unfurls. I'm like, is that meant to be what he thinks women's minds are like? I don't know, but I don't think it is at all. I think it's just wherever the journey went, he just sort of went with whatever felt like the right genre was, and it didn't matter that there wasn't a lot of coherence.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, it doesn't matter. I still wanted to turn the page.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of liked that there was so many tempo shifts, like stylistically, but that's part of my response to it being so extreme. I actually quite liked that about it. Coherency is great, but it's not always necessary. Look at The Winter's Tale.
Yeah.
Two completely different plays and styles. And you're like, so I don't know, it didn't bother me, but I don't know what I would class it as. But fan fiction, it's kind of weird. When I thought that, I'm like, it's exactly what it is. Because it's for somebody who is a masterful and skilled writer, it's almost like there's places where he massively displays that and places where he hugely doesn't. And it's so like, did he have a ghostwriter on this? Like that actually did go through my mind at one point. I was like, did he actually write it?
Yeah, well, I mean, not that anyone's ever gone to. I mean, so after his death, he would have, a number of people, including Kingsley Amis, who tried to imitate his style. Kingsley Amis ghost wrote a few Bond novels.
He did.
Yes, Robert Markham. Here is it. Yeah. Following Fleming's death, Kingsley Amis took over the series for a few books, and under the pseudonym of Robert Markham. And they're what's great about those books is they're more Fleming than Fleming. So like you can't actually read them without vomiting. It's like here's what I think Ian Fleming is, and I'm just going to go that a little bit further. But it's Kingsley Amis of all people.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. So there's all these Bond pastiche artists, all these Fleming pastiche artists following that. But people do say that The Man with the Golden Gun, which is his final book, is not ghost written, but a first draft.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't say I was like, let's start a movement to find out. I don't think that much or care that much. But there are moments where I was just like, oh, I expected it to be tighter. But then there's places where it's so tight. But then after when I finished it, I was kind of like, you know what? It kind of works. It doesn't bother me. But yeah, genre-wise, there's thriller moments, there's action. I mean, it's everything.
Yeah.
It's everything.
I think it is a genuine attempt to reach out to a different audience.
Yeah, I do. Like I said though, like tempo is so interesting. It's like I like that.
Yeah,
it didn't bother me. It's like there's one of the Harry Potter books. I've only ever read the Harry Potter books once, so I can never remember what happens in them or what happens in which one. But it's one of the ones towards the end. It might be like the 5th one or something, and it's massive. It's like the first really huge one, where the whole action, highlight, the big denouement moment is like 2/3 of the way through, and then the last third is all just like talking about it, and that doesn't work.
Yeah.
I was like, just do the slow stuff at the beginning, move that, you know what I mean? But that Fleming does that. He gets your build up, he gets you interested, he sort of draws you in, and even if you think she's annoying and frustrating, you kind of know who she is and what's happened to her. So by the time that you have to care about her, whether you do or not, you are invested.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that I'm both impressed and disappointed with in the way that he writes for VM is that,
fully at the same time. Yes.
Yeah, is that he Fleming is he's writing what he knows. Like, he obviously doesn't know women. We've established that, but he knows the air. He first of all, her backstory is very similar to Bond's. Like, she's an orphan, so is Bond. I think there's an attempt to say that these two people were destined to meet because they're sort of the same person in many ways. But also, she's very similar to Ian Fleming. She was a journalist,
right.
Foreign Office. So it's all things that like he's never like this is a big swing in stylistically for Fleming, but
content-wise,
he's sort of like, it's like, I know about the Foreign Office, I know about journalism, I know about America. It's all good. She's kind of like Bond in this way, and she's a lone individual, all that. So it's kind of, I think it's sort of like it's going between safety and experimentation in terms of like who we think, which is good. Like, I mean, I think the fact that it is rooted in some sort of genuine knowledge and truth, for want of a better word, that kind of makes it, I wouldn't say it's that, well, I mean, I don't know if it's truly believable, who knows, but like there's you buy it. Yeah, funny old book. All right, well, I suppose we have to get there. Let's talk about the line of this book. Oh God. To enjoy in an uncomplicated way. At some point in this book, the line, "All women love semi-rape," is written. And what do we do with that? What do we do with that? I mean, I don't have an answer for this. The only context that I have for this is what we've done already, which is in Casino, the last line of Casino Royale, "The bitch is dead now." Mm-hmm. And we talked in the last meeting about how that was an unfortunate reduction of what this novel was, because you could suspend disbelief up to that point that it was Bond's misogyny that we were reading, not just Fleming's. But at that point, you're like, well, if you're going to boil the novel down to that, it's a shame. This isn't the last line of the novel. This isn't the last. No, not by any means. But it really jumps out at you.
I mean, when I read it, I literally was like, I did a double take. I was like, wait, what? Did he just? And what was funny is I'd watched your Casino Royale interview before I read it.
Yeah.
So I knew about that, and I was googling as well, but I came across, and you're going to know this, in Casino Royale, Bond. What does he say to Vesper? He says, and now he knew that the conquest of her body, because of the central privacy in her, would have the sweet tang of rape.
Yeah.
Which is horrible.
Oh.
But like it, just the fact that he ends the book that way.
Yeah.
And so I kind of did the double take, and then I went, why am I surprised? Yeah. And then, but the whole sentence is, all women love semi-rape. They love to be taken. It was his sweet brutality against my bruised body that made his act of love so piercingly wonderful. Which I'm like, is he speaking on behalf of, he says all women, or is it that she is so screwed up? Is she in trauma? It, moments, not even an hour before, she was about to be horribly assaulted by these guys. And it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm like, it's like living in that world. Like, how we were saying about how like women just expect to be. There's this David Hare play from the 70s called Plenty. They did it in the West End like 20 years ago with, I think it was Cate Blanchett. And it's all about arms deals, like secret, like underhand, like London mafia arms deals. But the female character in it is she works in a nightclub, and she has this monologue, and I cannot remember it line for line, but I mean, she says things like, all women expect to be brushed, bruised, battered, assaulted, stared at, propositioned. It's like, and she says, we expect this for the rest of our lives, whilst at the same time offering sanctuary, I'm making this up, reassurance, prestige, like we're the only point of loveliness in men's ever darkening lives. It's something like that. And that, I don't know the play that well. I mean, I remember learning the monologue when I was like 18, and then because I thought I was like deep and I could actually act it then, and of course not a chance. And then I saw it 20 years ago in the West End, and that speech, I was like, geez. And it had a totally different feeling. And that came to mind. And it's not that they love it or women love it, but the idea of being something to someone, if that's what it takes, which speaks of very low self-esteem. And then I thought about Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
That came to mind too. And of course, it's hideous. So it's so hard. I mean, it's a product of its time. It's all those things. But I mean, what the heck?
Yeah.
Fleming. It's get edited out.
You know what? So just to give you some idea of like, because that line, you read any that line cited as read it. Disown everything associated with it. But I didn't remember it being as late in the book. So as I was reading it, I knew it was coming, but it got so late in the book that I thought, oh, he's living in this room. Maybe I'm gonna get away with this. Like, it's such a weird way of thinking about it, but it's genuinely how I thought about it. I thought, like, oh, maybe this was, a line taken out of context. Like, I've already read it somewhere and I didn't notice it because, and this happens with Fleming. It's sort of there are things that you actually read in context and you go, oh, okay, well, that's clearly from this character's perspective, or something like that. But then when it hit me, it was like a double punch. So I was like, I resigned myself to this not being in the book.
Right.
Everyone's like, it was the Guardian journalist's take.
Yeah.
I've written it off as at this point. I was like, oh god, oh no, it is in there, and it's as offensive as ever. But
I mean, it's like it doesn't really matter whether it's Fleming's point of view or Vesper's point. Oh, not Vesper. What's her name? Vivian's point of view. It's offensive.
yeah,
and it's horrible, and it shouldn't be in there.
Indefensible, it shouldn't be in there. Completely.
Yeah, I don't have there's no excuse. There's just not an excuse for it. I don't think. It didn't need to be in there. It doesn't advance the story. It doesn't tell us any more about Vivian. In fact, it tells us what we already know and makes it even worse about how low her self-esteem is and how little she values herself. Yeah. But that idea of being someone to somebody is the only way to like have value, even if it's some guy you've never met who's just turned up and, you know, got a couple of people. I mean, it's like, it's so low. And like when I'm so frustrated with her the whole way through the book, and then that literally was that. I mean, I wouldn't say it was the last straw. I just wanted to go, Vivian, get some therapy. Get some therapy, get some Lexapro. Let's work our way through this.
Absolutely. You know, it is the same feeling I have with The Bitch Is Dead Now. It's like, are you going to reduce the novel to this? And that's why it's as damning as that last line is.
Yeah.
It's like you've done some really interesting stuff here. Like you've said some really interesting things about you know, the way women have to endure the behavior of men. That's genuinely interesting, like something. But you boiled it all down to rape apology.
Right, and it's like, I mean, I'm guessing, I don't know anything about Fleming, but I'm guessing he was some sort of fan of sadism. I don't know how else to put that.
I would guess, yeah, certainly in literary form.
Yeah, and so it's like he doesn't have a filter on it somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that does diminish the book. Yeah, and so I thought that was didn't need to happen. And the thing is, you know, like you were just saying earlier, it's like, is it James Bond's misogyny in certain places, or is it Fleming's misogyny in certain places? But it always seems to go unchecked, regardless of whose it is. And I'm always like, where were the editors? Like, wasn't there like, you know, where censorship and like this got through?
Yeah.
Or were they just checking that the semicolons were used correctly? Like what was their job when they were editing this? I don't know.
And it's, you know, the difference between, you know, 53, where it's, you know, it's a breakout novel for a new writer, versus 62, where it's, you know, an established literary series that's about to become a
massive movie franchise. Was this the 9th book, 10th book?
I'm not sure actually, but yeah, I mean, it's
been around a while, yeah.
Oh, it's a way in, yeah. Probably not 9th. I want to say 9th, 10th.
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know, but I knew it was later because I mean, you told me, and then I'd seen it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so this was the year, yeah. Yeah. Oh, it just, I know, it's like that. Oh, maybe it's this is horrible, but like that thing of like he's trying something new and he's trying to get a whole new fan base, but he wants them to know that this is how he actually writes, you know. Let me just make sure I get that in there so there's no mistaking that people think I'm something else.
Yeah, it's a capitulation, you know. It's like in the same way that the James Bond bit of the book boils down to the same old stuff. You know, he ends up with the same old sentiment of, you know, misogyny first, sexism first.
A lot of mansplaining.
Yeah, I mean, the other, I mean, the you know, the last thing I really want to kind of put out there really is, again, as someone who's, you know, not read any of the other books, and I mean, self-loathing is a big thing here. I'm not just in Vivian's character, but just
right.
You know, at this point in the series, it seems like Fleming is done.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say not having read the others, but just my knowledge of like the movies, and again, I don't know how accurate they are. And see, the early ones, I think, I'm sure, are more closer to the books. you know, but that kind of thing of like, when you get to a certain point, 10 years in or whatever it is, where perspectives change. I mean, I think that's true of pretty much anything. You can only do something for a certain length of time, and then for whatever reason that may be, it shifts. It either soars one direction or it fades, but some sort of shift will happen. And I guess this, I didn't think this when I was reading it, but now having talked to you and thinking about it now, it's like, it's almost like he didn't even want James Bond to be in it.
No.
He wanted to, it's like, well, I guess I should put Bond in or no one will buy it.
Yeah.
And also the fact that he didn't think it was very good, telling his publisher that he thought it was a mistake. Yeah. Using the prologue, which in some ways is brilliant, but in some ways is like, ooh, here's my loophole. You know, it's
deniability that this is a real
deniability. Yeah, like, what did he hate about himself so much? I don't know. Because there's a lot of there's violence too, of course, but so much violence, but violence that is about abusing women. Yeah. It's not just like, oh, the spy is getting caught and the bad guy is torturing the spy because, you know, we're trying to destroy the world. It's abuse against this one woman, which just seems so like, who's that aimed at? Or what's it aimed at? Maybe it's a who, maybe it's a what, I don't know. But yeah, very like dark. Because there's no like rainbow at the end of this. There's no like, oh, we come out the other side and this is what we've learned. It's just like, so yeah.
I mean, if you kind of boil it down to, you know, if you take it away from the pages of the book, you've got a writer who's in crisis. Basically, it's sort of, I have to do one of these a year. I don't want to keep doing the same book. How do I pick it up? It's really interesting. I mean, not necessarily with this book, but there's the only recorded audio of Raymond Chandler is a conversation between him and Ian Fleming, recorded for the book. And it's really interesting. I mean, Fleming always idolized Raymond Chandler. You know, he basically invented a whole genre of British literature that was trying to do what Chandler did for American literature. Just take like a stodgy, kind of mystery-based genre and turn it into something very cool and modern and exciting. And in that conversation's amazing. If you ever anyone who ever gets a chance to listen to it, because you know Fleming is, every bit of advice that Chandler's giving him, Fleming is pocketing, because the next few books have all of that in. Like he said, like Chandler says, I'm thinking of marrying off Marlowe to someone. But he never did. But of course, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is exactly that.
He does, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Chandler at one point says, why do you always do torture in your books? Like, point blank, you know, he's the bluntest man in the world. He's not going to make bones about this. He said, why do you have torture in your books? Torture's, it's not good. It's not a good device. And Ian Fleming says, well, you know, I'm in the classic British self-deprecating way. He says, well, I don't know how to write anything else. You know, it's the best, it's the easiest, it's the lowest common denominator.
I paint landscapes because I can't paint fingers. It's that, you know.
And Chandler says, you know what you need to do? You need to do brainwashing. Brainwashing is better than torture. Man with a golden gun.
There you go. Yeah. Oh.
So it's really interesting to me that he's like looking for all these he's looking to
well, and then, you know, when did he write Chitty Chitty Bang Bang?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that was in the early 60s.
So you've got, you know, getting bored with James Bond. Let's go completely the other way. Oh, I mean, that's one like crazy book.
Which is the most James Bond children's book in history. You know, he can write one book, but in many different ways. And I know what's great about him as an artist is it will always boil down to, even when he's pretending to be a woman narrating a story, he will over-describe scrambled eggs. He will tell you where you can get good food, or like do the gearhead bit. It's always going to come down to the same.
Right. Even when he's writing as a woman, he will always give you a scrambled egg recipe.
Yeah, it's really.
I might be completely wrong. I have never read Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I've only seen the movie. Or is it only a movie?
No, it's a book.
It is a book. But isn't there a bit where the father is an inventor in the movie, and the invention is to scramble eggs or fry eggs? I might be wrong.
Oh, no, you're not wrong. I mean, Roald Dahl and Ian Fleming. The reason Roald Dahl wrote "You Only Live Twice" is because of a gentleman's bet between the two that he would write. He would do a Bond film and he would do the script for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang for the movie. Yeah.
You just know so much stuff, Tom.
No, it's not. When you watch the "You Only Live Twice" movie, it's like, oh yeah, that's Roald Dahl. That's a Roald Dahl movie. That's got nothing to do with Ian Fleming. And likewise with the film version of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. But yeah, I mean, it's in. I mean, one of the things that really, just to kind of wrap this up, really is kind of interesting. Like when Bond appears in the book, again, only a third of the book. Can't stress that enough.
He finally deigns to show up.
Yeah. He's constantly represented as past his best, a little off his game.
And yeah, there's one bit where he even says, he's like, oh, I messed that up, didn't I? Oops, I should know better. Like, dude, you're a 00. Yeah. You don't make mistakes.
And then at the very end of the and this is one of my favorite parts of the book, he forgets that he's 007. And to me, that says it all about where Ian Fleming is as a writer. Like, it's like Bond is not interesting to me anymore. Like, he's forgettable. He's like he's a mirage of something that I used to write. Just like in someone else's eyes, he could be like, a footnote. It's just fantastic. It's a fantastic ending. I love that. That to me is a better twist. That's the better twist. Women love semi-rape. That's the twist. Is to say, obviously, is to say, you know what? I don't even remember what the guy told me his number, but I don't remember. It's like the most memorable thing in Bond fiction. Like, 003, 004, I don't.
I can tell you this because it's only part. The whole world, whoever watches this, I don't know. There's 3 people who watch your video. The thousands of people who watch this video, I don't know. They won't be able to crack my code, but part of my Wi-Fi password is 007. Because I can remember it.
Right. The fact that she can't remember is very interesting to me. Like at this moment in history when Bond is about to enter a kind of immortality that even in Fleming, right. The main character in his novel
can't
remember his number, and it's
like he was a spy.
It's in the night, it's like one franchise is like entering its end phase, another one is. It's fascinating. It's just fascinating to me. I mean, I think this is coincidental, but at one point in the book, Bond does a trick of like dressing up the bed as a dummy.
Yes, yeah.
And they do that in Dr. No as well. I don't think they were consulting each other, but it's fascinating that they both like. It's like one of the only times that the book and the film are doing the same time.
It's weird. Oh yeah, I wonder because it's funny though that like that whole thing, even that part of like dressing it up as a dummy and like how it goes to such lengths to explain the right way to do it.
I mean, you mentioned Bondsplaining. I mean, it's like
that's your term. I mean,
Bondsplaining.
Bond explaining.
Properly.
I'm gonna do it my way, and let me tell you, like with the eggs recipe, you know, like that whole thing where he starts telling his story about, you know, his exploits in Canada, and like the whole time I'm like, it's not relevant or important. And of course, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, Ian Fleming has to do this for the Bond fans or whatever. But I'm still like, it makes him seem such a terminable bore. And also, because it's not interesting. And also, like, it's all about me. I know that you are about to be, you know, horribly, horribly raped and possibly murdered by these terrible hooligans here. But let me just tell you some great stuff about myself and what a star I am. And it was just like,
I mean, in the last meeting, we observed that too. He explains the rules of Baccarat over a 4-course. And I remember Mike saying, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot that other people were in the room." It's not narration. It's just him telling.
Bond-splaining, yeah.
Yeah. So bond-splaining, I think, is a phrase we're going to have to.
It's a hashtag. I think we got, or maybe you need to get a website and buy the domain name for that. Bondsplaining.com.
Like this is the right way to do this thing, and then the irony of it is that even he screws it up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, missed the boat on that one.
I love the bit though where he's like, you know, they're like, we could have gotten away, but James didn't fix the tire on his car, but he had a reason for not doing it.
Yeah.
And then tell us like 3 pages to tell you why he didn't change the tire, and you're like, oh my god. And it was a legitimate reason. He just didn't need to tell us quite that in so much detail why. But yeah, I kind of loved the Bond-splaining. I mean, it drove me crazy because I'm like, this is just stupid. But I'm like, I kind of love it because it's so, I don't know. It's the characteristic of it. It's just great.
Yeah, there's that element of it which we find irritating. That kind of behavior, that the mansplaining part. The other part of this that never fails to strike me is that he is a high functioning drug addict.
Yeah, right.
It's sort of like, you know what we need to get through the night? Benzodrine.
Right.
So far, he does it in Moonraker and a few other books. That's the secret of his ability. He's taking dangerous drugs all the time
to help him, you know, be a better spy. Isn't it?
It's hilarious.
You what?
I think I mean, you know, again, it's the Sherlock Holmes thing.
Yeah. That's true.
I mean, you know, The Sign of Four is the only British literary classic that begins and ends with the hero of the novel shooting up. And Bond is definitely in that tradition.
Yeah, just the drugs and the drink and the women.
Yeah,
it's I mean, that whole thing of like being able to think straight and like.
Right. Yeah, I need focus, so.
Better take some Benzodrine.
Take some Benzodrine.
But her too, like the whole. What does she take? She takes something. At one point. Or is it he gives her something to help her sleep or?
Yeah, right. He does.
Yeah, I can't remember, but yeah, she's very good with the first aid box, though, isn't she? Good little nurse, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I was waiting for her to sort of like jump in.
Yeah.
Especially as Bond is like, you know, represented as a bit doddering at this point. I thought it would be a classic opportunity for her to just kind of jump in and take the reins, but Fleming's not willing to go that far in terms of what he's allowing women to do within the
Well, she did think ahead by getting like the cutlery, the silverware, but you know, she's not going to use it. But then when it comes to it, all she can do is kind of like throw some knives and forks. Doesn't really work.
No,
No,
it doesn't. Well, we're at that point. I think we're going to talk about. I mean, we've already started to talk about adaptations. You know, Fleming didn't even want a paperback version of this. circulating. So when it came to the 1977 official Bond movie version by Eon, they only took the title and not the storyline, which was apparently was at Fleming's insistence.
Well, there you go. Interesting.
We talked about where they might have stolen a couple of things for this and later movies. And we already talked about the audiobook version from 2014 by read by Rosamund Pike.
Highly recommend. Yeah. I thought she did an amazing job.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't mentioned the audiobooks before. There's a great Bill Nighy version of Moonraker, which I would heartily recommend, and also listen to the interview afterwards where he talks about how it almost exactly the same way you did. Fleming is a much better writer than you would imagine. So,
there was also years ago, when I still lived in the UK, so I'm thinking like at least 16, 17 years ago, the BBC, you might even remember this, did like radio, they weren't audiobooks per se, they were like radio adaptations with Damian Lewis reading them.
Yeah, absolutely. And prior in the 80s, they did You Only Live Twice as a radio play with Michael Jaston.
Oh my God.
No, actually, let me take that back. It's Michael Jaston is a great Bond. What is not so great is the number of white actors playing Japanese in that.
Oh yeah.
Like in my head, it was like Michael Jaston is, but I just remembered the very, very bad Japanese accents by RADA actors in that. No.
Yeah, not good. Let's not do that.
Not good.
Oh my God.
Well, this membership card is on its way to you via Royal Mail, following approval by the James Bond Book Club Membership Committee, or JMUMUC, which is, there's never too many words for an acronym, I find. But this is going to come to you by Royal Mail, so probably the best way to deal with this is to send it to your British friends and let them send it to you.
Probably quicker.
But we got to do it by Royal Mail. Sorry.
Nothing
I can do about that.
In country and all that. Long way up, short way down.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Oh, sorry. I was going to say thank you for inviting me, because it made me read my very first James Bond book, and now I kind of want to read some more.
You've only really read a third of a James Bond book.
Well, it's a whole book, but
From Russia with Love, and then you get the 2/3 of Bond, then you've got a whole Bond book, and then you decide whether you want to go on to read the really racist ones.
Really racist ones. I'll look forward to those.
I was on a podcast recently with a fantastic broadcaster called Pete the Retailer, who hosts Star Wars Minute, and I talked to, I was plugging the James Bond Book Club on the podcast, and he said, I read Casino Royale, thought, great, yeah, I'm going to read all of these. Got to Live and Let Die, realized, this is too racist, I can't read this. Which is the second book. And
that's the second one?
The second one, yeah. It's in the Bond films, it's way down the line and nowhere near as racist as the book itself. And I said, I said at the time, I said there are texts in Western civilization that racism is stuck to like flypaper. You can't separate them. Right. And so for all those people who are like, this is going to be chronological, we're going to go Casino Royale, no. And that's not because, it is because I'm afraid of Live and Let Die, but that's not the only reason. I want to do a kind of more, and the next up is Octopussy.
Oh.
Short story collection that includes The Living Daylights and Property of a Lady. So that's short. We're going to do some Fleming short stories next. But yeah, so So there we go. So yeah, this is a kind of interest. You'll get a sense of read From Russia with Love, and you'll see whether you want to go through a whole James Bond novel.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm pretty brave, but I'm getting old. I don't know if I can stomach it. We'll see. Maybe I'll power on through.
Well, there's some other experience. There's some other people's experiences to let you know. Sometimes the non-chronological approach is the best way.
Maybe I would say maybe I should just stick to the movies, but I did really enjoy reading it, and so there's a lot of I don't know.
There's this sense that Fleming, because of the movies, because people's experience of the movies, they assume Ian Fleming is a hack, which is not the full story.
No.
But it's also not untrue. So that's the great thing about the Bond books is you get, it's a guilty pleasure from a writer who knows how to write. But unfortunately, that's all he wrote. And, as Fleming said when he found Vivian's transcript, that's all she wrote. Your membership card is on its way by Vespa. Thank you so much for joining the James Bond Book Club.
Oh, thank you for having me in the James Bond Book Club. I feel so honored and privileged.
Thank you.
Back on.
Anything?
Brain.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, mine is beyond empty. Whatever's below empty is what I have. Anything you'd like to plug before we go?
I'm sure there is, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. What am I working on right now? Lots of things. Things I can't tell you about. I'm not allowed to.
That's really on message for.
I know. I really am like. I'd love to tell you about this that I'm going to be doing at some point,
but I can't.
Not allowed to tell you about it. And so I can't tell you about that. Yeah, lots of things, but I'm not actually allowed to tell anyone yet, so I can't.
I mean, let's go to VanessaDinning.com and you'll.
Eventually, it'll be on there.
Yeah.
I am doing dialect work on a production of a play called The Hatmaker's Wife, which is going to be at Cal State San Marcos, the university, with college acting students, theatre students at the college there. And I'm doing dialect work on that. And it's kind of awesome because there's a bunch of it's a sort of fable kind of character play. But there's a bunch of characters that are sort of described as sort of having pseudo Eastern European accents. So they're not definitive, but it's kind of fun because when I did a little Zoom with the three of the actors the other night, and I said it's kind of like Bond villain, but not. And so they were like, oh. So I actually alluded to James Bond. So there you go. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the dates are. I think it's at the end of August, early September, but it's up in Vista, and it will be an in-person experience.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to get to that stage now where things are moving from virtual to in person. So.
Yeah, I've seen two things now, both outside, but two performances, and it was both of them. I was like super emotional just to like be in an audience and be in that collective space, and I was like, why am I so emotional?
Oh, yeah, because it's a novelty now.
What we do, it's like coming home.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but there's things on the horizon. So thank you for plugging my very exciting website. There's not a lot on there, but once I can get some.
I think most humans would disagree. I had trouble boiling it down to a resume.
Yeah, well, you're on there.
I am. Well, I'm very grateful that you would put our little performance of the movie.
Absolutely. When am I going to get to play a Bond girl? Are you kidding me?
Well, it's yeah, and I mean, this is really a follow-up to I've always been fascinated by the literary side of Bond things as well as the film side of Bond things. So I wanted something that really plugged into that side of it.
The musical side of Bond things as well is fabulous. which is my thing. But thinking about you and your, well, which hopefully will come to fruition at some point, your James Bond, not musical, but exploration into the music.
Exploration music of.
But I have, because I teach, I think you know, I teach cello, and in the Associated Board of the Royal Schools of Music Grade 3 cello syllabus, guess what's on there?
Goldfinger?
Oh,
the Bond theme.
So I can so play the Bond theme like awesome on the cello. I'm just saying.
That's great.
See, like, it's really fun. So, you know, if you ever need anybody to play the Bond theme on the cello for you, I am your girl.
Yeah. And, you know, in Bond literature, we in this book, we have the ink spots. So
I'm getting that? The ink spots?
Yeah, she listens to that's her Proust Madeleine is.
Oh, right. I was like, wait, what? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember everything. Her short orgy of remembering, I think, is the term. So Fleming was always very musically minded. In fact, the first we talked about this in the last meeting, but his description of what Bond looked like was Hoagie Carmichael.
Right. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Became Sean Connery.
It's like to look like Frank Sinatra, apparently. So hasn't looked like that since, but it's certainly in the books.
Oh my God! It's just a whole world, isn't it? You never get tired.
No, it's inexhaustible. You know, I'm gonna, you know, when I'm done with this, I'm going to turn on Pluto TV and there'll be a Bond movie on. You know, it's like, it's you know, it just never, you can never be done with it, or certainly I can't be done with it.
It's so interesting. I love it, even though I'm completely ignorant of it. And having watched all the movies, I think my cat is about to jump. I have a cat on the top of a bookshelf up there. But I remember being really small, and my dad would watch them.
It's like,
oh my gosh, I didn't realize. But like my dad would watch the movies. So as a kid, we didn't really know what was going on, but just like those memories of like sitting with my dad watching James Bond. And I should tell you, even though I teach cello, I take lessons myself, and I won't name his name, but he's a significant player in the San Diego Symphony. Is my teacher, and not who you'd expect to be a huge James Bond fan, but is a huge James Bond fan. And you go to his studio to take lessons, and he's got like the gadgets and the car. And he's talking about Aston Martins all the time, and like obsessed. And so I told him I was doing this, and he's like, "Oh, it's amazing!" You know, I'm like, "Okay, had to read a book," you know. But huge fan of James Bond, and so there's all these things that make, and I always enjoy going for lessons and just being like, "Oh, there's like from that movie, and there's from that," you know. It's kind of so fun.
Yeah, it's a wonderful world of constant delights, and as an adult, you know, like the same thing. I grew up with the movies, not with the books, and then as an adult, started reading the books and read them all within the space of about a year, and binged, as you would say, I suppose these days.
Binge read.
It was just, you know, it was just it gave me something. It gave me a completely different angle on the same material, basically.
Yeah.
Which is really great to have, and be aware of all the cultural and political problems of it, for sure. But I've always gone back to those books in some capacity, and it's a kind of shame that they will be just seen as source material, you know, for the movies, because they have an identity all of their own. But it's also part of the reason why we love Bond movies too, is
right.
What's in those books. So it's a double-edged sword, but it's something that I'm always trying to bring light to as much as possible, and you know, often apologizing for, but also just sort of saying like, Also, look at how this changed British literature. You know,
Yeah.
we had these kind of thrillers before the James Bond books.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, totally. I mean, and he's just so.
Marple and Poirot to, you know, to a whole different level.
Trying to imagine like Miss Marple and the Cold War.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, what Chandler did to bring, what Raymond Chandler did to bring the crime novel up to date is kind of the same as what Ian Fleming did, and was trying to do.
And it's such a huge genre. And like now, you know, it's funny though, when we were talking right at the beginning and we were saying about like, you know, reading these books on vacation in these beautiful locations and you've got this hideous stuff going on. I remember being on a train reading an Agatha Christie and being so scared. Like the adrenaline was like coursing, and I'm on a train from like Durham to London, you know, one of those like GNER trains, which are disgusting, and you know, the guy with a trolley going, "What cup of tea?" And I was just like, and I got nervous, like going, "What if somebody like it, like literally?" And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm that sensitive a person that I like live in the book that much, but like that kind of, they're brilliant. These sort of books are brilliant, and so there's a reason why they're so popular, why they're so well read. And
Absolutely.
they really capture us. So yay Fleming.
Yay. Thanks, Ian. Well, thank you so much for joining the James Bond Book Club, and you know, membership is assured. I'll have a word with the chairman, and I'm sure we'll be able to work something out.
Thanks. Slip him $10.
So for everyone else, stick around to hear what you thought about the book, and also a digestive version of the book in under a minute, if you didn't make it to page 143.
Bye.
And now, The Spy Who Loved Me, digestive. My name is Vivian Michel, and you're probably wondering where James Bond is. Well, we'll get to that in about 100 pages, but first, let me tell you about all the men I've slept with, who each represent a different flavor of toxic masculinity. Cinemas are full of grubby men having sex, but enough about the movie of Dr. No. America's full of crime, especially its motels. My mother warned me about this, but I didn't believe her until I was held hostage in an inn by two men who might as well have been called murderer and gangster. Nope, not quite ready for Bond yet. First, I have to over-describe how to cook scrambled eggs. When I first laid eyes on James Bond, I thought he was a villain too. Nothing that happens in the remaining pages of the book have made me alter that opinion. It's all right. I love rape. All women do. Well, not all women. Just the ones written by men. Comment, subscribe, review on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram via Lonesome Whistle Productions. The James Bond Book Club will return in the short story anthology Octopussy on Thursday, July 15th.